Welcome to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
8 seconds remaining in the fourth quarter of Game 3. 4 seconds. Ionescu will heave and hit. Sabrina Ionescu with the biggest shot in Liberty history. The 0-1 is hit high and deep right field. If it's fair, it's gone, and that one is fair. And a home run, a towering home run into the second deck for Shohei Ohtani. The 3-run homer, and the Dodgers have blown it open. It's now 7-0.
You take what you do well, and you look at what the other team does well, and you look at what you don't do well and what they don't do well, and you're trying to negate your weaknesses and exploit theirs. And so, we're still learning a lot about this team, because, it's one thing when you've had guys for 4 years. We've had these guys for, 1 year and 6 games. I mean, you're still learning about them. They're still learning about themselves. And, I look forward to the day when, the seniors are telling the freshmen, hey, this is how we've done things the last, 5-6 years here. That's what builds a great program. Right now, we're kind of all in it together, learning together. I'm learning about them. They're learning about us. And it's fun, but it's more sustainable when it comes to the players. So we're still figuring out a lot about these guys, and it was a good week though.
Good morning. Welcome into Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla. What's up, DB?
Oh, hi. I'm just talking to my man TK real quick.
What's TK got this morning?
TK always likes to get updates on Micah.
Yeah.
So he just asked me how the freshman game went. He asks me every week, so it's cool.
Big Micah guy?
Yeah, apparently. I think they have some much like yourself, you guys have some ornery mannerisms. And
me?
And kind of some lawyer tendencies to you.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I tell you what this dude did Tuesday.
TK or Micah?
Micah.
Okay.
It's always something.
Yeah.
So we were having practice and whatever, they're playing Bellevue West, and it was like this big matchup. But next week's the big one. I don't know if they're ready for Elkhorn South's freshman. I mean that with all sincerity, but that's the big one,
mm-hmm.
right? So this one was, they put in a new coverage, and Bellevue West got a couple young studs, and so we're kind of paying attention, but we're kind of not. So we're done with practice, and we go up there late, and almost like about 2 minutes in, this dude, he's got like a 75-yard reverse.
Mm-hmm.
He's heading down the sidelines. He's about to score. There's a couple guys in front of him kind of blocking
mm-hmm.
down the sideline, because you don't get long plays without people blocking downfield, right? So he gets ready to go in, and the guy kind of jumps from right to left and kind of strips him from the side.
Mm-hmm.
Gets recovered in the end zone, and Westside scores. And so Micah kind of lays there for a second. He's on his back. I'm like, shoot, what's up? So I didn't think much of it. He got off. He kind of jogged off, and about 15 minutes later, the OC comes over to me. Great dude. He works security in the building. He goes, "You know what your son did?" And I immediately I'm like, oh God, what? He's like, he's laying on the ground, right? I go, yeah. So, I'm taking a knee and I'm talking to him, and he goes, I think I'm going to be okay, but since I fumbled, I'm going to lay here for a minute. That's what we're dealing with.
You sure he's not a youngest child?
That's what we're dealing with.
Yeah. He's got a lot of familiar tendencies.
Isn't that crazy?
He's got a lot of youngest child vibes.
Who does that?
That sounds like something I would do, honestly.
I mean,
that sounds right up my alley.
And it's hard. That's why I keep that CPS number on the fridge. It's a magnet now.
Well, yeah,
it used to be on a letterhead.
You gotta make sure it's.
But I found the magnet that you can put on the fridge. It's just a reminder. Yeah, that's what we're on in the old Benning household.
That must be why I like him.
Nah, that's probably not why. Yeah, couple of jerks. You don't want me to even get into the whole Lonzo Ball smack we had to talk about last night.
Oh, what are you talking about Lonzo Ball for?
I'm like, boy, zip it. I got 2 of my teams playing, and they won't let me multi-view it because of the conflict in networks.
Is he pro Lonzo Ball or anti Lonzo Ball?
Yes, he's pro Ball. So he's
we love Alonzo Ball guy.
No.
We love Alonzo Ball
doesn't.
guy.
He's not even old enough to know any better. And this dude is yapping how like he likes Ball's dad because he defends his kids.
Oh no, I'm not a LeVar Ball
hey, listen,
guy.
That's what he was on early.
Oh, get out of here, Micah. You're so close, bud. You're so close.
Yeah, you know.
We love Lonzo because he overcame the expectations of his dad being crazy. That's why we love Lonzo.
I don't know, man. What good young prodigy stars outside of a few didn't have like seemingly over the top parents?
LeBron.
Well, yeah. We had a lot of people invest in him.
He did.
I don't know if you know that story. You ever heard that story?
Which story is that?
You know, they took him out of the harsh neighborhoods in Akron and put him at the private school, and families invested in him, and they invested in his mom and that crew and surrounded him with people that cared about him, and all of a sudden it allowed him to overcome what was penciled in as a pseudo destiny, the LeBron James story.
Did anybody tell him like, hey, you're supposed to live here, play here, bud, you can't go over to this other school? Or
knock it off?
No, we're going to talk to Nate Neuhaus in a little bit. We're going to get all ramped up for this.
No, we're not.
Oh, yeah.
No. Again.
We're pouring the gas on, baby.
Again, we're in the solutions business.
That's true. Sometimes the solution is to burn it to the ground.
No, we're not doing
Every
that.
once in a while it is.
We're not doing
I'm
that.
not saying it is in this situation, but you never know.
No. So
you never know.
So I watched a couple of 500 guys play, and with the game was drunk, but it just happened to be on television.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't have to go to my viewing options with the Pens and the Sabres.
I was watching your baseball game last night.
And baseball was on at the same time.
Yeah, I was watching your Dodgers just go
I
ahead
felt
and
like
cruise on into a 2-1 lead.
If you've watched Walker Buehler since his return,
mm-hmm.
he kind of struggles early and then kind of settles in. So once the Mets didn't score with like 24 guys on base early, I felt like
I feel like that's an exaggeration. Might not be that many.
It's probably 10.
I tuned in
the first 4.
I tuned in.
He was always pitching out of trouble
at 2-0.
Yeah,
and then watched the rest of the way.
Yeah, so it was that was fine.
Well, until I got to 8-0, and then I was like, I'm good here.
I watched the news.
How was that?
That was fine. I liked AK's blue suit that he was rocking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We love AK. It's one of our guys.
I really only watched for the news or for the weather.
Yeah. That's why I just do the app, you know?
Yeah. I don't know if I have the app, and I think I maybe disabled it because it was giving me updates, and that was way before I knew how to do the notifications thing.
We may have
selective notifications. I know now. I'm not that
revisit
dumb.
that.
No, I'm not that dumb.
No, I just mean revisit the app.
Oh.
I assume you know how to do the notifications now, but
yeah,
you might have to revisit the app now.
Is the app your thing?
Yeah, I mean, we have 2 different types of phones, so you'd have to get a different app than I do. But
so they have a KTV app for it's not the
no,
same app.
This is just like the Apple app. Like the Apple comes with a weather app.
So does this one?
Yeah, so it's they're different, I'm sure, but
Wow.
I'm guessing they get their information from the same place.
Yeah, so for like 5 days in the 70s, a little windy.
Yeah, I like it.
Big chances.
I like the 70s.
Big chance for fires and stuff.
The temperatures, not the decade.
So I wanted to like really be mad about this panic and this rush to turn the sprinkler system off, but I let it ride because I didn't feel like
You got a little time still.
I'll pick and choose. Well, that was my whole point.
Yeah. You got a little time because the ground temperature doesn't get as cold underground as it does in the air temperature, you know?
I had to like go to a DM.
Yeah.
From somebody that would be in the know that was like, hey, it's not a hard freeze.
Yeah,
you
cool.
have plenty of time.
You're cool, man.
When everybody else says it, apparently it's true.
I don't even think.
But if I say it, it's like, what do I know?
It's because you're a little crazy sometimes.
No, I mean, I can read weather, kind of. I mean, the numbers.
When you can read.
The numbers. I don't know about like fronts and stuff. Unless it's an under or over.
Gotta watch out for those fronts.
Or a bear front or something like that. It's the only fronts I know.
You gotta be careful there.
I don't know why people. I can't read radar, but like, let's just.
Yeah, I'm actually okay on the radar because you just see which direction it's moving. That's all I'm trying to do.
Our trainer at school is really good.
Really into the weather.
Oh yeah, and I get years of experience with with like what's coming in and how hot Cam was really good at that.
I rely on my mom almost exclusively for my weather updates.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I feel like you're too old for that, but
listen, she's on it. She's retired, so she doesn't have like she can stay on top of things that way, because she's doesn't have like these other work responsibilities and stuff. So plus she wants to make sure I don't like die in a tornado, which I appreciate.
Yeah, it's like supposed to be 30-mile-an-hour winds or whatever tonight.
It's not great.
No. And this is how you know it's prep week.
Mm-hmm.
So we go through all our special teams situationally. We bring them on, bring them off, right? Typical pregame stuff.
Sure.
Coach Samanji's in my ear. So there's 2 units that I have under the command of Coach Jernigan. So one of them is kickoff return.
Mm-hmm.
So he kept saying kind of under his breath, but he was in one of those moods, so I didn't really want to mess with him, but he kept saying, "You going to pooch? Are you going to pooch one?" He said, 30-mile-an-hour winds, Coach. You going to pooch one? She said it like 4 times.
Yeah.
I'm moving around. We're trying to simulate their zones because their kicker gets a lot of touchbacks and these couple specific zones. So we're just tinkering with the return. So I told our kicker, I said, "Hey, hang one up in the wind. Let's make sure that we can still get there in case we don't get good kickoffs, whatever."
Mm-hmm.
So 2 other units go on. So literally like 12 minutes of time have elapsed.
Mm-hmm.
So he comes over to me in the middle of this drill and he goes, "So you're not going to do pooches?" I'm like,
Nah.
"No, I definitely didn't say that." I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" He goes,
"Seems like he really wants you to do some pooches."
He goes, "Get your unit back out there again. We're going to do actual pooches." So we got ready to start our regular practice. He's like, "I can't war." I was like, "Hey, guess we're doing pooches." So it's that kind of week.
Did he call you John? Like John Papooches?
No. It's just you just never know. Like, I mean, coaches are
I'll be
weird.
honest.
Like
Jernigan seems a little surly.
Oh, he's for an adult.
Yeah,
he's naughty. Yeah.
Ornery, is that a good word for it?
So in the team meetings yesterday afterwards before dinner, he goes, "Hey, if you have too many questions this week about stuff you guys should know, feel free to go down there and read the board that I put all the return." No, this is how he talks. "Feel free to go down there and read the board, where I draw the pictures and we go over the returns and the yardage. That's up there for you guys to study if you want." Because, I mean, you could just tell it's prep, right? Like, everybody's
a little on edge.
Oh,
a little passive-aggressive.
Yes.
Like when I ask you somebody's title and you send me a screenshot
After
of the Google.
this game, I'll tell you about the guy they sent in for wearing the blue sweatshirt. Because it was cold Monday. And he went to it was all I had. And they're like, "Yeah, but no.
Get out, bud."
It's just funny, man. And then I got into this great debate on why the Jets are favored over the Steelers last night. So it was very entertaining.
Like Benny Inla?
Yeah, I just, how the line just doesn't make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Especially as good as Tomlin is as an underdog at home.
Yeah, I think people...
Is it the Devontae Adams bump?
I think probably there's a little, especially publicly.
Do we realize they didn't beat the Bills?
I understand that. I think there's probably a little public Devontae Adams bump. There's probably a...
Steelers aren't very good.
They don't believe the Steelers are very good. There's probably also is Russell Wilson going to play in this game? Because that's not great for the Steelers.
Oh, we still hate Russ.
We all bring bags, right?
Yes, we do, Coach.
I don't think Russell Wilson is good at football.
Coach Tomlin is significantly younger than me. Do you think I'd ever call him Mike?
No. You'd be like, "Coach?"
Nope. He just looks mean.
We're just talking.
He can't be that much younger than you. A couple years.
So he was hired in. No, you're right. A couple years. Right.
It's not a ton.
Because he was 35 in 05 or 06 when he got hired.
Yeah.
05.
So he's older than you.
Yeah, he might be.
He's a couple years older than you.
You see how old Mike T is. You'd think I would know.
I would
Sure,
guess
I
like
watch every press conference, but he never takes the podium and says, "Hi, I'm Mike Tomlin. I am
53 years old.
65 years old."
I don't think he's 65.
How do you know?
Seems old.
Yeah, you're probably right.
I don't think that's quite right.
I'm just waiting for the internet, but
Man, there's no shortcut to it.
He probably I'm guessing a lot. Honestly, I'm guessing a lot of it is the Russell Wilson deal. Not just like, hey, we don't like Russell Wilson, but the uncertainty at quarterback.
like, yeah, he's 52.
Oh, that's close.
But guess what his sign is, though?
What's that?
He's a Pisces, like your boy. How about that?
Cool.
Pressing.
I hate you.
Is Micah a Leo?
Micah is May 13th.
Oh, no, he's not.
No. He's whatever his sign is, though. I looked it up once.
May 13th. We're gonna do this real time.
No, I'm dead serious. He has all the attributes. My barber broke it down for me.
He's a Taurus.
He's a total Taurus.
There you go.
He's a total Taurus.
Yeah.
Oh, he is.
Coming up on the show today, as I mentioned, we got Nate Neuhaus. He's assistant director for the NSAA, and he's
get, Shane.
He's in charge of football, so we're gonna solve all the world's problems this morning.
I highly doubt that.
I think we got like 23 minutes. Let's get it done.
Oh shoot, is that all? Maybe.
Coming up at 8:45, we got Brian Edwards, our Vegas insider. At 9, we've got Michael Bruntz from Husker 24/7.
So I wonder what day they're leaving. I suppose we can ask him when we talk to him.
Yeah,
tomorrow morning.
Why don't we just ask when we talk to him?
How far of a drive is it? Do you know off the rip?
Indiana?
Yeah,
it's about 10.
You sure? Or are you just making that up?
I believe it's about 10.
Sounds made up.
I'm going to check right now.
And 10 sounds safe.
From Lincoln to
10 sounds like a number that a guy would say if he wanted to be close but not have to be.
I'm pretty sure it's 10. From Lincoln or Omaha?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I can figure out the difference.
All right, we're going to go Lincoln to, was it Bloomington?
Yes. How many people do you think we'll have going?
Oh, decent amount.
Good answer.
10, 16.
10, 11, 12.
Hi, Coach McGuire. A lot of pressure on your guys this week, Coach. Can you read zone defenses?
Can you read?
Yes, sir.
Being able to read's good.
Oh, I keep hearing that. We have really worked ourselves up into a frenzy.
What are we in a frenzy about now?
I don't know. Hey, Shane, do you have that clip queued up that we have of Coach on the old show yesterday?
Yeah, Coach, the Big Ten obviously expanded west, and I'm just wondering, like, how does that affect your travel schedule? Are you guys able to go out on Thursdays? And do you think it's as big deal? I think you guys were the only win up until this past weekend out west. Do you think it's as big of a deal as they've been making out?
Oh, that's a good question. So I got a certain way I do things, right? And I've learned from a lot of people, but like I like to have our Friday walkthrough here and our meetings here so the guys don't miss class in the morning. And I like to get to the hotel as late as possible. I don't like spending a lot of time in a hotel, and we'll get there, feed them, maybe have a quick meeting in the evening and get up and play. So, my weight guy and my director of football ops, they've got all these designs, like go out Thursday, this way you got to do. Well, I mean, we played out at Weber State, Utah State, some of those other places before. You know what I mean? No. We ain't doing that, guys. So, we're going to get there as late as possible. Okay, we're going to wake up and we're going to play the game and we're going to come back. That's what we did. We got to the hotel about 8 o'clock at night, right? Ate our meal, went to bed, woke up, played 3:30, kicked their ass, and came home.
Really?
So
really? I told you on Monday, it's okay if you tell me to get over it. Because I have not spewed much Indiana hate.
Ate our meal, went to bed,
I will
woke
say
up,
this.
played 3:30, kicked their ass, and came home.
In 10 hours last week, he went from, man, what a great story at Indy too. Okay.
Kind of unlikable.
How fast can we play this game?
So there's a.
Do you feel that?
Yeah.
Or is that just me
No,
because I'm uber competitive?
Maybe this is a weird thing to kind of harp on, but like that clip in particular kind of bothers me. And then I start
because of how he talked about Weber State and like.
Partially, but I'm also when I hear something that I don't like, I start going back. And then I start hearing other things through that lens.
Oh, boy.
And I'm like, oh, maybe this guy isn't charming. Maybe he's a D-bag.
It's pretty simple. I win.
Maybe the Google.
Okay, we went the whole week without playing that.
And here's the other thing about it is he then tries to play it off as though he's not being a Dean Blandino rather than just owning it and being like, yeah, that's just kind of how I am, bud. Because he went back. I heard him try and give an explainer. I think it was on McAfee this week. He tried to give an explainer about the Google Me thing. And he's like, well, I mean, they'd ask the same thing like 15 times. It's like, no, you're being a D-bag. Just own it. Just own the fact that you're being a D-bag. It's fine.
I don't know about that.
I do. Or like in that clip, right? He acts like he had a choice when he's coaching D2 and at JMU if he wanted to go out there early. They didn't have the budget for that. I've been at those schools. You don't have the budget to go out early. Don't act like it's this some grandpa. I don't really like staying at hotels. But it's bravado that you don't have the budget for it. fine. Maybe and you probably don't have the budget for it at Indiana, if we're being honest.
Is it an endearing story still?
No, because now I think he's a word
it's weird. I don't know how I feel.
I'm annoyed by it now.
About the level of success that he's had. I get it. Are you just telling me, or is there a real lack of humility?
I think there's a real lack of humility. I also think there's a lack of self-awareness there.
Well, maybe. So what I don't know is maybe he just feels like he's never gotten the respect he's due.
He definitely he's a definite chip on the shoulder guy.
But he's won a ton.
He has won a ton.
People always say he wins a lot.
Yeah, but he didn't. He didn't get a power conference job till he was in his 60s. That's late.
Yeah.
By any measure, that's late.
I would say that.
Right? I mean, we thought Sam Pittman was late, and he was in his late 50s, right? Like that's a real thing. Sam
Pittman is literally lobbing you the bird right now.
What?
You said he was going to get fired. He might not now.
Who did I say was going to get fired?
But to me and our 18 listeners.
It
was in the summer.
Maybe. That sounds like something I would have said.
Yeah.
Not as sure about it on
you and
almost everybody else in the country.
Correct.
I was really out on a limb there on that one. But, like, the thing with Cignetti, and it's fine, man, have the chip on your shoulder, but then he acts like he doesn't. That's the thing that bothers me, is if you're gonna be a chip on your shoulder guy, just own that. Own the, hey, I'm mad at the world. I should have gotten a shot sooner. Look me up. You guys are idiots for not hiring me. Sure, be that guy. Don't be like, I decide to fly out as late as possible because I think it's better for the whatever. It's like, no, you couldn't afford to fly out early.
I don't know, man. James Madison won in a lot of sports. They might have been low-key papered up. They might have had some scratch.
How long was he at JMU versus everywhere else he'd been?
No, I understand. That's a good point.
Right? Like, by the time he was at J, he's like, well, I got a certain way that I like to do things. It's like, yeah, because you couldn't afford to do anything else. And that's fine. You did incredible work with less than incredible resources. That's amazing.
I felt like when
a chip on the shoulder
the laughing was starting early in his answer, a punchline was coming.
Yes.
Yeah, I felt like that.
Like, I'm cool if you're a chip on the shoulder guy. I really am. But then be that guy. Don't be like, I wasn't trying to be a jerk, but they asked me 15 times, and then I got kind of tired of answering the same question. Okay, no, you had that. You can't tell me that's the first time he's told somebody to Google him. Maybe he hadn't done it in front of a presser before, but that's a line he had ready.
All right, so listen to me.
Google me.
Knock it off. Just kidding.
I mean, you're just out there telling me to Google stuff yesterday, but it's fine.
Google me.
I couldn't help it. That was low-hanging fruit. I typically don't eat that, but
it's pretty simple.
Okay, Shade. Do you remember the last time? Because, I always like context, even though at this point the data is the data. Nebraska doesn't win against top 25 programs. Do you remember the last time it was it's not slanted, because Indiana has earned the right to be the story. But the fact that Nebraska is kind of like, it's not even a thing. They're not even a thing. Like, this is
Nebraska's a total afterthought in this game.
This is a good, and it's not because they're playing the Ohio State or Michigan.
No, it's because Indiana's like the Cinderella story.
Like potential good stories, but they get no burn.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if
I think that's good for Nebraska.
I think so too, but I'm just not sure they know what to do with it.
Go be the real chip on the shoulder guy, not the sound clip guy.
That's. I told Avery yesterday, that's the hardest thing about this game to cap, because on paper, it's pretty even, Steven.
Yeah.
But the managing of emotions and the efficiency thing, that's what's tripping me up.
Here's the other thing you have to wonder about, and we can talk about this. How does a guy that's really never dealt with this before, this is the most attention Chris Cignetti's ever gotten in his life. We'll have more Hurrdat Sports Radio coming up next.
We will be back. 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 You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Yeah, Indiana's done a great job. You know, they've transported in a bunch of good players from I think 10 or 11 win James Madison team. You know, like a couple years, some of those guys probably played there when they were FCS and then they were FBS, so they're winners. They know how to win, and that wouldn't have happened. You know, I remember when I left Temple and took the Baylor job, it was in my contract that I couldn't even offer a scholarship to a player that we had been recruiting at Temple. And now, you know, then you know, some coaches came along and they had guys committed to them. They took another job and they took the commits. And now you see guys taking their whole team. And so, not saying that's wrong or right. It's just different. It's just changed the dynamics. And so, I think every year people are going to have to forget the logos and forget the names and just wait and see how things play out, see how the roster is. And Coach Cignetti's an amazing coach. He's done a great job of, taking that team and putting together a top 20 ranked team.
Welcome back to Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. That's DBM Ravi Lulla. We're here at Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill, where 2 weeks from tomorrow you can join us for our next live breakfast before the UCLA game. That's November 1st. Come hang out with me and DB here. Get a little breakfast, maybe a little, early morning Friday.
Breakfast sandwich?
No, you get breakfast sandwich, get a little Friday cocktail if you want to. Get things started off right,
Yeah.
Have a little fun here.
Like
maybe
that.
you could take the edge off a little bit. Maybe Coach Cignetti needs to come to one of these because it seems like he's got a little edge on him.
Yeah,
Maybe
Bryce was not vibing with the whole interview.
Maybe needs to have a little Bloody Mary to kind of take the edge. Because I
bet he's an old-fashioned guy.
I'm sort of being facetious here, but there's a point where the chip on the shoulder becomes a detriment, right?
People have argued. I don't know.
I think there is.
Well, clearly, Brady never reached it, so I don't know.
I think there's a point where it kind of consumes you to the point where it is no longer helpful. I think that's a real thing.
So you think Brady kind of shook his, but he just talked about it because it was convenient?
No, I think a lot of people can let it slow burn forever. I think some people, they can't control the fire, right? Like you can have a little smoldering fire forever and it never burns your house down or whatever, you're fine, right? That thing gets out of control, it consumes you pretty quick.
Yeah, so you said something going into the break that he has been here before, just not on this stage.
Right.
Because College Game Day came to James Madison last year.
That I understand that.
And you remember they had the whole big deal against App State, and App State ended up winning in OT.
That's you're right. I always think of those as sort of College Game Day's novelty games. Right, when they go to the smaller school.
But people,
they pay attention.
All the talk was about JMU.
I get that.
Crashing the party, remember?
But this isn't. This
is very similar.
I think this is different.
We're talking about Indiana crashing the party.
We are, but we've been talking about Indiana nationally as sort of this darling, whereas JMU, at least I felt at the time.
Well, they had just made the transition. I don't know.
Was more kind of this oh, man, what a great story. And it was sort of this cutesy thing happening over in this lower division of football. That's how I felt about it at the time.
So it's not a cutesy thing right now?
No, I think people are taking Indiana seriously, which I'm not saying they shouldn't, but it's a different thing, right? Nobody thought JMU was going to the playoff, right? Nobody thought JMU was going to compete for a national title or that they were going to go and play Indiana and whatever, or play Ohio State and have it be this big matchup in the Big Ten, right? That wasn't what JMU was doing.
I forgot what I used to like about Josh when we first met online. Did you read his statement?
Which one? On
said Cignetti doesn't bother him near as much as Nebraska special teams.
Well,
that's a very Josh thing to say.
Played pretty dirty, kicked their ass, and came home.
Go ahead, say it. You're not wrong.
I'm actually not. Listen, this is probably the hottest take I'll have all week.
It's Thursday. You're running out of time.
I'm not as freaking out about the special teams as everybody else is.
No, why?
Because they make some good plays in special teams, right? They've made difference-making plays in special teams to the positive as well. Now, there's some stuff they need to get cleaned up, obviously. But it's not like last year with the offense, it was hard to find positives, right? It's not hard to find positives with special teams. It's just the negatives are pretty loud. I get that. I also think that if you, and I know this is a big if, but if you can clean up the snapping game, I think most of those get fixed. Most of our problems with special teams get fixed with the snap. I think. Maybe I'm crazy. But to me, that's a pretty small part of the equation. Now it matters a ton, but it's not like you have systematic failures throughout the special teams unit. There's a lot of things going well on special teams, I think. And the things that aren't going well are just incredibly loud. But they're incredibly loud primarily because of this one reason.
You think you can that's obviously something you can clear up during a normal bye week.
Snaps?
But it's been systemic for so long. On the surface, you think, snapping. I can fix that. with downtime.
So here's why I find it somewhat encouraging, right? Because
they didn't have a game to play.
That does give you a little more time. But for the most part, I think this is clearly a mental issue with the snapping, because on extra points, it has mostly been fine. Haven't missed an extra point all year, knock on wood. The snaps have largely been fine on extra points. So if you can snap it on an extra point, you can snap it on a field goal. It's the same thing, right? You might be in a different spot, but that shouldn't bother the snap. That should bother the kicker.
And by the way, there's no rule on
distance. To snap it back, right?
Yeah.
I don't know that having a snapper.
Oh, I showed you that. My crack statistician sent me that.
Yep. I don't know that having a snapper that's struggling, snap it further is the answer, but there is no rule, right? To go back to a question we had last week. So that's why I sit here and I go, okay, I know they're capable. They have a guy, at least one guy that is capable of doing it, because we see it on extra points. So if you can clear whatever mental hurdle that is, and I know that's not easy. I understand mental hurdles are challenging, but it's, in my opinion, easier to clear a mental hurdle than to find a guy who can physically do something that no one else on your team can do. I feel like this is
kind of deja vu, because I remember when I was talking to you in the summer about building special teams and how Nebraska wants to play. I told you, you realize there's more that goes into kicking than just you being worried about a kicker's psyche. Like, there's lots of mechanics. And I find it very ironic that we are now talking about mechanics.
I believe that I adjusted to specialists, not just kickers, if I remember the conversation correctly. So kickers and punters are generally the primary ones you're thinking about. But if you're talking about holder, snapper, kicker, punter, those to me are your special list. Now, you want to throw returners in there too. That's fine. But my concern is that the psyche of the specialists is hard to coach in a way that it is with, hey, this is the scheme we're trying to execute, right? I trust that less, and kickers the most of all. I trust kicker psyches the least out of that entire group. I think that part is really hard to coach, but it's better than having a guy that just physically can't do it.
Which one of these are you more apt to agree with?
Okay.
Here for the special teams being like serving in volleyball, willing to trade service errors for aces.
I wouldn't love the trade, but if I'm going to have the service errors, I better have the aces.
Okay. How about this one? Special teams have already cost the Huskers one game. Not sure Ravi, Lulla, and I are watching the same team. Maybe he's getting up to get another seltzer when the special teams take the field.
Well, if I was getting up to get a beer, everybody be cool with it. Like that's
a good one.
That's what we're doing.
That's very witty.
I mean, I have my moments.
It has cost them a game.
I understand that. I also don't know, like, we're gonna pretend like special teams was the only problem in that game?
No.
Right?
No.
So special teams contributed.
I get context.
Special teams contributed to that loss. So did some defensive mistakes. So did some offensive mistakes, right? Like, if you just start taking, hey, if we take special teams and make it perfect, then they win that game. It's like, well, why can't I do that with defense too? Because it's not like special teams is the only thing they didn't execute there. There was a bunch of stuff they didn't execute against Illinois.
Yeah.
That was their worst defensive performance of the season.
It's just so interesting how that one got into such a chess match where Nebraska couldn't get tendency.
Yeah. I mean, Illinois had a really good game plan. They executed it really well, and it gave Nebraska problems in all three phases of the game.
There are some similarities in this game.
Also, can we not just pretend like Tommy Hill gave him a free touchdown because his foot was hurt and he probably shouldn't have been out there?
Yeah. So do you remember when that happened real time? And I talked to you at
and I go, what happened?
I go, did he quit on that play?
I couldn't tell. But obviously he had an injury that Coach Rule said, I think
he got spun all the way around, like his
and then
back
stopped.
His back was to the receiver.
Yeah, he was in a blender. Like it was one of the, if it had not been for an injury, one of the worst coverages I've probably ever seen from a guy that's good.
So I've probably gone through 6 different inserts. Because I broke my foot as an 8th grader. And it was broken going into my 9th grade year. Probably rushed it back. But anyway, I've always had a foot problem. I remember getting these orthotics made. I remember our trainers made me like 7 different types of deals. My fasciitis hurts.
No, I get that.
Like it hurts.
I totally understand that. And so I'm not putting this on, Tommy Hill should have played through it. I'm just saying like
I mean, that got the party started. That was on the opening drive.
That was on the opening drive. There were 2 plays to Bryant on the opening drive where Tommy Hill looked overmatched. And then we find out he's got the foot thing. He doesn't come back for the rest of the game. We're just acting like that didn't happen and it was all special teams' fault?
Yeah, I hear you now.
Like, yes, special teams were an issue. There's a lot of issues. We'll get into it coming back.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back.
I got a text from, I think it was Marquise Butte. Well, it was. There's really 3 purposes in the bye.
You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
There's really 3 purposes in the bye week, at least the first bye week. It's, to self-scout and look at, really you say to yourself, hey, what do we do well? What are we not doing well that we're doing too much of? And, who are the guys that are making plays for us, who aren't, how can we help them? And then the second thing is you're developing next year's team. We go out there with the 2s and the 3s and we get live work, the 4s, some guys are down the depth chart. And some guys really popped, like some guys from where they were in training camp to, working on the scout teams to now getting to that bye week. I mean, you see some guys really, really, really pop, and you watch there and you see a Braylon Prude or you see a Caleb Benning, and you say to yourself, like, hey, we're going to be in really good hands here when these older guys leave, just seeing the way that they practice and many more. But, So I think those that's important. And then finally, you're doing Indiana. You're getting ahead on the next week. You're getting guys ready and prepared. So you're taking your self-scout, but also looking at the opponent and trying to put it together. And then you're getting some guys healthy. We're a little beat up, so getting some guys healthy is important.
We are back, wrapping up hour number 1 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla here at Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill. Kind of continuing this conversation on special teams, Johnny chimes back in that he understands context and 3 phases of the games, but despite mistakes everywhere else on the field, sometimes you just got to make the kick to win. Sure, Johnny, but it sounds a lot like you don't understand context, right? Because context means that if you play better in other phases of the game, you don't have to make the kick to win. It's the same thing we talk about with officiating, right? Why a lot of guys are just like, hey, I'm not going to get on officials here. There are times when you're playing really well and everything's going right, and a call costs you a game, takes literal points off the board. I get that. But a lot of the time, you could say, hey, there's a lot of other things we should have done. Shouldn't have been in a position where a holding call cost us that game. Shouldn't have been in a position where Dan Lanning running 12 guys onto the field cost us that game because our quarterback has the situational awareness to get down and call the timeout or to throw the ball out of bounds and give us another shot, right? Like contextually, that one thing doesn't matter if you shore up even a little bit in some of the other phases of the game. But we sit here and it's really easy. It's the same thing we're going to talk about with Nate here in a little bit, right? There's an easy thing to point to because it puts a finite thing on a big issue, right? If you're not playing well on offense, defense, and special teams, it's really easy to point to. We can't make a damn kick, right? It's really easy to point to. Oh, man, there's this horrible inequity between Millard South and Lincoln High or between Benson and Central or whoever, right? It's really easy to put a point on it because we've got a scoreboard. The issue is a district education, a city education issue. It is not just a football issue. Now, it's really easy to just point to the thing. You point to the scoreboard or you point to the missed kick. But contextually, if you fix some of the other things, we wouldn't be having this conversation. That's the point. That's what context means. I can't just sit here and be, okay. I mean, I've done this a million times, right? I used to cover Creighton as much as anybody in this city. Creighton men's basketball, at least. Not as much as Matt Demarest covers everything else Creighton, right? But Creighton men's basketball, I used to cover as much as anybody in this city, right? And there would be games where they would miss a shot late or they'd fall apart late in the last minute. That used to be a big narrative about Coach Mack is they didn't play well late or they didn't win close games late, right? That's gone away because they've shored up the rest of the game. And my argument with them was like, hey, when you don't have as good of players, you lose late games. When you don't have a guy or a couple guys that you can go to, you lose games late. It's a miracle they've gotten to the point in some of those games that they were even in a position to win it late. But until they get better guys, you're not going to win those games late. And guess what happened? They started getting better guys. They started winning games late, right? It wasn't hey, we get mad because we lose a game in the last minute. It's you put yourself in a position to fail.
You think what ails Nebraska and the special teams, which was what's kind of what we're trying to get to with that clip, is something that builds on the different phases to not be in that position? Because he started out by saying what we do well, what we don't do well, what we're doing too much of that we don't do well. Mm-hmm. Like that didn't fall on deaf ears, right? Because then I'm going into, all right, what can you fix in the bye week? Like, I'm not surprised he had the whole thing broken down.
Yeah.
Right. But if we think it's mechanics and not talent, mechanics are something you can definitely work on. It's interesting that you.
Can I make a distinction between mental and mechanics, though?
Well, it depends on what you're talking about.
Because I'm talking about the snaps specifically. I think that's a mental issue. I think there is a mental hang up there on field goal snaps. Because I see it work on extra points almost without fail, knock on wood. And then we see it struggle dramatically on field goals. The mechanics should be the exact same, right? Of a field goal versus an extra point?
Yeah. Is that rhetorical?
No, I'm just making sure because I'm making sure.
They are.
Right?
They are.
I they look the same to me. So if they're the same mechanics, to me, I make the distinction between mechanics, because physically they can do it. They've got the mechanics down because we see it on extra points. There is a mental breakdown between the extra point and the field goal.
Yeah.
Let's get to Pete here on the Hurrdat hotline. Let's talk about some keys to the game. Pete, what's going on, man?
Hey, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Pretty good.
What's up, Pete?
I guess and we'll see what you guys think, but I think whoever makes the best adjustments on offense and defense, they're going to try to take away what we do well. We're going to try to take away what they do well. I think what coach makes the right adjustments and how soon they make the adjustments is going to be key to the game.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I know sometimes, and I appreciate the call, Pete. A lot of times people will say, well, no kidding. But the reason why I think he's spot on here, because it is usually always about adjustments. Mm-hmm. There is a certain way that Indiana likes to play. Mm-hmm. You can clearly see it. I'm not so sure it's as clear about Nebraska offensively, but certainly Nebraska has defensive tendencies too.
Sure. Which
is why you heard Bullock say, hey, pre-snap disguising what we want to do defensively. Hey, our pre-snap movement, we need to be in different places to keep work guessing. They're already telling you. Mm-hmm. If we just sit and do what we do, Indiana's going to sit and do what they do.
Yeah.
Right? Well, and Indiana does it pretty well.
How much do those –
And then defensively.
Yeah.
I mean, can you get Indiana out of playing zone?
Do you want
to get Indiana out of playing zone? So those are the things.
Because my initial is, hey.
I'm with Pete in particular about this game because Indiana has been able to be so rhythmic in what they do.
Yeah.
Nebraska has been disjointed enough on offense where I'm like, shoot, I'm not really sure what they want to do and what Indiana would do to adjust. Because Nebraska has a lot of options.
Yeah. They can do a lot of different things. Well, they have done a lot of
things. They haven't done any for a prolonged period of time, but they're capable of doing lots of
Which I think is one of the things that frustrates the fan base.
Right.
Because it's hard to pin down.
But to Pete's point is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm not boxing Nebraska's offense in that category. But I do think, in particular in this game, I mean, Indiana does what they do.
You can make an argument that it's hard.
A lot of their games look the same, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. They do
almost
what they do.
Identical. Right? You can make the argument that Nebraska's offense, because they haven't nailed down quite an identity, they've showed they can do a lot of things, can be harder to prepare for because you don't have this script of exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Let's get to Lance talking about special teams here. Lance, what's going on?
Hey, guys. This thing on?
It is.
What's up, bud?
It is.
Hey, everybody. Hey,
is what thing on, goofball?
The microphone radio thing. Hey, congratulations to Caleb for getting the shout out. I'm glad he's putting toward the attitude and effort to make a move, and so good on the kid for that. I know you got to be proud.
Appreciate it.
Number two is I'm going to give Ravi some grace here and say, I think if you're correct, if you do some other things better, then you don't have to be as reliant on special teams. Like one thing comes to mind, red zone scoring, right? If they're able to put the ball in the end zone at a higher rate, I think they're scoring on like 28% of their red zone. They're converting 28% of their kicks. But if they were more proficient on scoring touchdowns, I don't think special teams, specifically the field goal unit, would be such a hot topic. The problem is in field goal blocks and punt blocks, we're 133rd in the country at both. And so to me, it's a small operation where you only need, 2 or 3 guys to be good at it. And so it's a non-negotiable. I don't think you can be that bad at it, especially when you're I'm not going to say bad team, but you're a meddling team. You're a 5-1 team. What's it take to go to 5-7? You got to find a way to get good on special teams because I think.
Hang on, real quick, just for clarity's sake. They're 5-1, but they're a middling team, and Indiana hasn't played as good a schedule, and they have one more win, and they're not. Is that what you're saying?
Well, no. Okay, so.
Or is it the special teams that's making them a middling team?
Well, when I say middling team, I look at what I think their record is. What I believe they're probably a 7 or 8 win team. To me, that's kind of a middling team, right? Like that you're kind of in no man's land. You're probably not in the top 25, or you're at the very end, and you can go upwards of like to the 40th ranked team. So I say it's a middling team because I think if you were to look at our schedule, you would say you
okay,
could make
so
the most hay.
that's my point. That's my point. So you'll look at Indiana's schedule, and they have opportunities for more wins because it looks more favorable. So even though they only have one more win than Nebraska right now, you could see them being good because the schedule is favorable.
No, I don't think Indiana's a good team either. I think they're a middling team. I'm not on here saying they're better. I think the one thing that we can say about Indiana is, even though they've played a really bad schedule, I don't think they've played a top 55 team. They've done well on both sides of the ball. There's not an area where you can be like, man, that looks atrocious. I mean, go down the line and statistically it backs up their outcome. And so, I think it's a close game. I probably lean Indiana right now because if they can cut Nebraska, if we can cut their offensive production in half, that still puts them in the 20s. And I don't know if we're able to get there.
That's Lance on the Hurrdat Hotline. We've got Nate Neuhaus from the NSAA coming up next.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. Welcome to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Welcome back to Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. That's DB. I'm Ravi. Lulla here on the Pillar Exterior stage. We're joined now by Nate Neuhaus, an assistant director for the NSAA, and he's in charge of football. Nate, how are you this morning? Nate, you there?
Good job, Shane. Hey, hi, Nate. How you doing this morning, buddy?
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. So how was I usually love talking to you about things other than high school sports. So should we start there? Have we taken any nice traveling trips lately? Like, what did we do? What did we do in the off season?
I was in Italy this summer.
Oh, did you see Tupac?
No, I did not. You know what the funny thing is?
You did see Tupac.
I saw Flavor Flav at the Coliseum.
Yeah, boy.
How wild is that? That's a true story.
I can't, but I was hoping you would have seen Tupac.
Nope, missed him.
Flavor Flav at the Coliseum. That's, if you ever played that game, Two Truths and a Lie, no one would ever get that right.
It was wild. I was on a tour and I heard a commotion. I turned around and there he was taking pictures.
That is incredible. Who's bigger, you or him?
I am.
Everybody, I think. Flavor Flav's a little guy, isn't he?
So's Nate.
I'm tiny. Yeah, I've seen him. I've seen Flavor Flav like probably 4 times in Vegas.
Oh my God. Okay. See, you know what's funny? I can't say anything to you without you probably being able to relate it to something, because your experiences are incredible. I could say, yeah, I was going to go grab a drink of water. It just happened to be on the moon. Well, I had been to the moon. And,
I also got to see Timmy Trumpet. He was fun.
Oh, okay.
Big Narcos guy?
What the world?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I'm a big Narcos anything guy, but seeing Timmy was kind of fun.
All right, before we get to business, any boxing we're looking forward to? Because I mean, that's what you and I are good at, talking about boxing till 2 a.m.
Yeah, there's a lot of potential fights that are being discussed, but boy, putting that contract and pen to paper seems to be slow right now in the boxing world.
It does. Hey, hi, I got on a as we transition, man, how difficult has this last year and a half, 2 years been? This isn't new to you, and you try to stay out in front, but you guys feeling the heat a little bit?
There's just different issues than we've ever faced before, and some of it's becoming more difficult, so it's going to generate more efforts by a lot of people to address these issues. No, certainly.
Nate, let me ask you this, because this has been something that's been brought up with me several times in the last week or so. We've had this discussion about kind of disparity in especially Class A football. A lot of people have brought up to me that in some of these smaller classes, a lot of these issues aren't new, that you just have disparity kind of maybe for more organic reasons, just enrollment and populations and things like that, but that they've been dealing with teams having to forfeit or not being able to field teams halfway through the year for a long time. Can you kind of at least give me some context on the accuracy of that statement? Is it something that does happen a lot in smaller classes, and just in Class A, we just haven't seen it yet, so it feels more unusual?
That is 100% accurate. There have been large scores put on the scoreboard in a variety of different classes, especially in Class D and D6, when you're dealing with 9 kids playing a game of 8-man football or 6-man football, and it's 50-0 at half, 60-0 at half, and they're running the clock and they're trying to find ways to complete their schedule. But yeah, this is the first time, and it's been growing, but this is really the first time that it's been the shiny object at the Class A level, and it's creating more and more conversations.
As a guy that once got beat 77-0 by Omaha Burke, I'm going to disagree with you. I kid because I carry. That was a real score. Nate, let me ask you something, because you bring up an interesting point, and I know you guys have to have these conversations. The difference between D2 and A is what it is, but the representation of NSAA is got bodies from across the state. Is there thought, or would it be considered to split up the representation from places where there's the bulk of the population in Nebraska to maybe, let's say, out of state when it comes to handling athletics from an NSAA standpoint? Could you go to multiple bodies or change the representation in terms of votes?
Well, that's a conversation that's taking place right now is what does classification, what do our districts look like, and what does the representation of those districts look like? There are committees currently meeting to talk about those specific issues, absolutely, because things look different in Western Nebraska than Eastern Nebraska. Things are different in Class A than in Class D. Yeah. And everybody's facing their own challenges, so we have to face each one of those issues separately or at least through a different lens.
So, Nate, you know, we've talked about kind of, this week we've talked a lot about kind of solutions, and you bring up things that are being discussed.
That's interesting, though. Can I just?
Yeah, go ahead.
So Nate, it would be something we're talking about where, let's say, you know, the different representations amongst so is it executives or directors? I can't remember. So you have a governing body that would be responsible for district out in towards, you know, Binkelman or Beamer, and then in Norfolk. Like, how many of those are there? 6?
There are 6 districts across the state.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. So you could have like 1 and 2 handle issues for 1 and 2, and 4, 5, 3, 4, 5. I can't count. 3, 4, 5, and 6 handle issues for 3, 4, 5, and 6. Because I do think it's interesting. Because I gave an example yesterday. I said I would feel if somebody. I love food, but if somebody asked me about Indonesian food, like that's out of my. Like I'm not qualified to speak on that. So is there kind of that brewing sentiment? Because I think it's interesting that you guys are already thinking about how to do that representation. So should like District 6 be talking about District 1 issues? If I'm just picking those numbers arbitrarily.
No, that's fair. And we can do it district by district. We can do it class by class. But through our legislative process, you'll notice that Class A may do things differently than Class B to C1.
Like the shot clock or something, right? Mm-hmm.
Shot clock, the way we classify, the way you assign districts, the way you qualify for state. Every class is a little bit different.
Gotcha.
And keeping it all straight can sometimes be a little tricky. So we've already got those mechanisms in place, but I think now more than ever, the people that are involved, the schools that vote, and the district directors, board of directors, they are all learning that we need to focus on the issues that are specific to us and let others deal with the issues that are specific to them. And we actually have what's called a caucus process, where if a certain class wants to do something specific to their class that does not affect the other classes, they have a way to run a proposal through that process that is then not or cannot be voted on by somebody from another class.
Interesting.
We're talking with Nate Neuhaus. He's the assistant director for the NSAA and in charge of football. Nate, so there's been a proposal from Fremont Athletic Director Scott Anderson that's gained a little bit of steam in terms of a new way of sort of scheduling in Class A. And I don't know if you're allowed to comment on kind of prospective proposals specifically, but my question is really, have you guys explored the opportunity or explored the idea of kind of dramatic changes to the way things are done at the Class A level, or are you trying to kind of look at things more incrementally rather than sort of just blowing up the whole system?
Yeah, like knee-jerk.
The current conversations have everything on the table, from an outside-the-box idea to a more streamlined idea, and anything that becomes more complex just takes more time to discuss logistically. Many, many times you see something that conceptually makes a lot of sense, but then as you sit down and try to put it together, the dots don't always connect. So it just takes a little time to maybe work towards the best case scenario. And maybe in the meantime, we can do little things to work towards that process.
So it's interesting because you mentioned committees kind of behind the scenes. And a lot of times parents and student athletes and athletic directors, because you guys do more than extracurriculars, I'm assuming, when it comes to NSA issues like debate and band and things like that. How difficult is it when you want to set policy? that you have to be careful you don't use the extreme example. Like, there has to be ongoing talks with your guys where you say, okay, now if we do this for football, is it the same as debate? Is it the same as, let's say, drama or dance? Like, are there those conversations, or do you guys just kind of boil it down and say, well, I mean, education is the right, and extracurriculars are a privilege? Like, how do you legislate particulars, or do you try to stay away from it, and that's what makes it so difficult?
I'll say yes, just to answer your question generically. But to get into it a little bit, that those are the challenges, because one thing that people, I don't know if totally understand, is the policies in the NSAA are enforced by those of us that work at the NSAA. However, the policies are written and proposed by member schools and voted on by member schools. And when those policies or procedures or things you read in our bylaws or in our football manuals or track manuals or activity manuals, those are written and passed by our member schools, and the NSAA then enforces those. So sometimes people want to point fingers at the NSAA. Why are you doing this? Well, it's because it's what our member schools pass. It's what they want. Now, not all of them. It's a majority vote. But again, these things are in place because of the member schools' efforts, and that becomes the discussion. When a proposal is written or submitted, and we have our first set of district meetings in November, is it a knee-jerk reaction to something that negatively affected that school? That's why they're writing the proposal? Or is it something more systematic that the entire state or the membership thinks is a good idea, hence all the voting and all the discussion? And sometimes it takes a year or two to really get something from idea stage to implementation stage.
Nate, I've been wondering this, and since you're in charge of football for the NSAA, you've got a unique perspective here. But I mean, we see I've been involved in high school athletics, kind of in different areas for a decent chunk of time. Like, we see, whether it's baseball, people getting their heads beat in, or basketball, these crazy lopsided scores. Is football different because of just the physical nature of the actual sport that it bothers us more? Because I mean, I've seen like 20 some runs hung on a baseball team, and it's over after 4 innings, and everybody's cool with it. But it happens in like, is it just the physical nature of the sport
I saw Benson and Gretna East
that bothers us more?
Probably. Yeah, I think you're onto something there. When you lose a baseball game or a basketball game, it might be embarrassing, and you might lose by 30 points, and it might hurt your ego, but it probably doesn't break your leg or give you a concussion. Where football is dangerous, and when the teams don't match up, it does create a different discussion. Absolutely.
So, Nate, while we are solving all the world's problems, I know. So because what we'll get like in our inbox or via social media or whatever is, well, the NSAA, you got to stop defending that they enforce policy and they're the Roger Goodells of the NFL, because Roger Goodell will suggest things to the ownership groups and then they can vote on it. And it's not always what comes to him. How do you deal with when you guys think you have a good idea, but it hasn't been proposed by the charter member schools that gets conversations going? Because you guys typically, you talk. Does it go out of order? Because I sometimes I think there's this perception, and this isn't a word that I would use in talking to you normally, but it's that they hide behind the charter member policy to not act on things. Fair or foul?
Well, I understand that, and I've been on the back end of that accusation before. And
yeah, right. Like you can speak to this probably better than most.
And sometimes that is just the harsh reality. There may be a policy or a bylaw or something that we do at the NSAA that you don't agree with or I don't agree with, but it's not for me or you to agree with. It's for me to enforce because it's written in our bylaws. And when certain issues need to be addressed, then I feel like we have a good working relationship with our schools, that we have these meetings and we can assist in authoring a proposal or editing a proposal to address some of the issues. So it is a working process between our member schools and the NSAA when we address bylaws and how they should evolve.
So, Nate, as you kind of, As you kind of sit here and see all the reaction, whether it's the last week or the last year where we've started to see this conversation more, you mentioned the term knee-jerk earlier. Like, at what point do you kind of say, hey, this is a real systemic or systematic problem that we need to address versus like, hey, we probably need more data points to figure out if this is a real problem or just kind of a one-off?
Yeah, that's a great point as well. And it just takes conversation and it takes observation of how things are evolving. If it happens 2 or 3 times and it's not a knee jerk, then it is something that needs to be addressed. And education-based high school extracurricular activities look different than they used to 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. That's just a harsh reality. And so either you begin to evolve and come up with new policy and procedure, or you don't, and then it doesn't look very good. So there are more conversations and different conversations taking place than ever before.
Nate, so I'm glad you brought up the education-based activities here, right? Because that's really what we're talking about. Is this is all part of what makes this so complicated is this is all married together with academic opportunity too, right? How much, just for my sake, for clarification, because I do think there is some misnomers about what the NSAA can and can't do and what it does and doesn't have jurisdiction over. Like, a lot of these policies are made in terms of whether it's open enrollment or transferring and things like that, are made at either the district or even school level, right? That's not a thing that you guys even touch.
Yeah, that's correct. When you talk in terms of option enrollment, when a student wants to change the school in which they attend, that is done through the NDE, and they then they option from one school to the next. Now, some schools have a closed district, some schools are an open district, so then they would address those issues. Once a student athlete decides to option from one school to the next, then the conversation gets involved with, if the student is an athlete, does the eligibility then transfer with the option or change of school? And then that becomes under the purview of the NSAA. But optioning or changing schools is a local school decision done through the NDE.
Okay, so how involved do you or don't you want to be, Nate, when it comes to the whole closed versus open deal? Because there has to be some pretty canned answers, because I would imagine with all the relationships you guys, I mean, like your team is fairly well known and respected throughout the state. Lots of relationships have been built. I'm sure people come to you individually or with specific issues just based on the relationships that you guys have formed over the years. Can you know too much when it comes to having to be objective for the greater good of what your role is?
No, I don't think so, because generally we stay within the lanes and the bylaws and we make those decisions. We don't usually get to make a decision based on, I think this student should or should not be eligible by my opinion. We don't get to work in that world. We work and we follow the rules as written.
Yeah.
And whether a school district chooses to have an open or closed district, that is their decision based upon their attendance numbers and do they have the ability or resources to continue to educate more students. And so sometimes they decide to close or open their district based off their resources. So those aren't the kind of things we get involved in. And sometimes we're backed into a corner and we have to make decisions based upon what the words say in our bylaws.
Go ahead, Ravi.
Nate, is there ever a point where, because this is something I think about a lot, whether it's with this issue or other issues, is there a point where you just kind of have to say, hey, like, we want to provide certain opportunities to the most kids possible. We understand that because of that, there's going to be some people that have a chance to take advantage of those opportunities in a way we didn't intend. But in order to achieve our main goal of the most and the best opportunities for kids, we kind of just have to live with the byproduct.
Yeah, that's fair. And none of the issues that we're discussing here this morning are specific to Nebraska. This takes place in every state across the country.
Yeah, because you guys trying to travel and study, right?
Absolutely. We have very close conversations with our contiguous states and our neighboring states, and we have national meetings and committees that we take part in, and we're all facing the same battles, whether it's with regards to officials numbers or eligibility or transfers or participation numbers. Nebraska, like a lot of other states, as I mentioned before, education-based extracurricular activities are changing, and everybody's trying to keep up.
Is this more about services provided and the ability to do so that's kind of clouded the original intent? Because it seems like everybody knows their rights a lot more in 2024 than 1994.
Yeah, that's also fair. I think people are in different situations than they've ever been before. When you like laws or anything, when you write them initially, they seem pretty easy and specific, but as things change, then there's exceptions to the rules. Well, then there's situations you never dreamt could be possible, and now you need to write more language that addresses each one of those unique situations. And that's what we're faced with right now. Things are different in our world than they've ever been.
Yeah. And I listen, I don't think this is our friendship. I didn't even call to ask for the interview. That was Shane. So I appreciate your willingness and openness to have the discussions, because I know they're hard, but you don't mind having them. But let me get you out of here on this, because you talked about committees and behind the scenes things, and I know the competition committee was pretty big. At least I there were some ongoing discussions about leveling the playing field, because to land the plane, this is what a lot of this is about, right? Where are you with kind of the competition committee and what you feel like some of those ideas that have been brought to the table are in the process?
Oh, they're gaining momentum, certainly. And I think now it's gone from conception stage. Is this an idea that maybe we can discuss and try to think outside the box to, okay, let's narrow it down to what we can actually implement. Those conversations are getting more and more direct each time they meet.
That's Nate Neuhaus from the NSAA. Nate, we very much appreciate the time and your willingness to have this discussion. I know it's probably been not your favorite week of the year, but we do appreciate you having all the time for us.
Gentlemen, appreciate it.
Hey,
Hope
so
you're doing well.
Hey, so again, with all the available resources you have, when are you taking me to a fight? All right, the whole Makovica thing is wearing me out, man. Like, when are me and you gonna hang out?
I'm ready. The last two big fights I wanted to attend, I couldn't go because we had NSAA official summits and officials clinics and things of that nature. But first big fight, I'm in.
All right.
Hey, next time
you guys, don't you have the better access to the pound for pound best fighter in the world than I do? I don't know. I'm just asking.
Nate, if you need to take another trip to Italy, I did take 4 years of Latin in high school too. So, just holler at your boy.
And full disclosure, Nate, he's a great driver. He's very much a rule follower. So if nothing else,
you're gonna be safe.
We'll be safe.
I'm all in.
All right, buddy. Appreciate you.
Nate, we appreciate it.
Thanks, gentlemen.
That's Nate Neuhaus from the NSAA. Really
hard questions.
No, I mean, they are hard questions. That's kind of the point, though, right? Is we're not just up here making excuses for why it's hard to solve. It's really actually hard to solve.
Yeah. The whole the educational, the academia world in rights and extracurriculars, I'm telling you, it's not like people think. It's hard.
I'm going to say it again for the people that didn't hear when I asked the question to Nate. In order to give the opportunities most of us want to most kids, there's going to be opportunities to take advantage of it in ways we don't want.
Yeah.
And if you want those opportunities for those kids, you kind of just have to live with it.
We will be back. 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 You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We're back here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla. We've got our guy, Oklahoma Tyler, wants to chime in on this transfers, open enrollment, all this kind of stuff. Tyler, what's going on, bud?
How's it going, fellas?
T-Moles, as a guy that spent the last 10 years around young people, what in the world would you know about kids in school, man? I mean, come on.
Hey, I've had three of my four have transferred, so.
No, but so what are we missing here, man? Because we could go as far back as you want or not. I mean, the opt-ins, the salary, like you know a ton. Like Tyler, what are we talking about?
Tyler,
here?
let's get to the text that you sent us, right? Because you think that even if you closed up shop on some of these open enrollments for high schools, that doesn't fix a lot of the problems.
Well, so there's always loopholes, right? And one of the biggest loopholes, or it is what it is, has always been get your child into the school you want them to go to early, because the enrollment stuff is typically at the high school level. So let's use, we'll go Pac Hill South as an example, or they're actually open now, but so Elkhorn South. And so typically, if you can get your child into a school early, they stay in that school system throughout. So if your kid's in middle school at an Elkhorn South,
JQ Osler getting into Westgate is in the first grade.
Right, and so then they just come all the way up through the system, Westside Middle, Westside High, right? And so it's not, so I think everybody's like, well, close down the transfers, and yeah, that would certainly have a big impact, but there's still ways to get into these schools. So it's not just as cut and dried. Make it 180 days for transfers, and then there's no more issues. Kids are still like parents are not dumb. They know what excuse me. They know what schools are good and competitive, coaches they want to play for, and so it'll just happen younger and younger. And you'll have your pathway into that school, whether it's closed or not.
You think schools are like willing to have conversations, because you talk about open and closed, and I tried to talk yesterday quickly about like the dollars that are attached to why some schools stay open or closed. Some schools can afford to stay closed because the revenue generated in that district is sustainable. Others have to invite other people in to have different budget line items met. Can we all agree on that, no matter what school we're talking about?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so do you think they're like willing to have? Is this to the point where you think schools are willing to have the conversation where they openly talk about budgets and revenue streams and not be able to talk about athletics, or are they hand in hand?
I think they are hand in hand. I mean, I think it'd be great. It'd be great if we could separate them, but they are hand in hand. They're, you can't have one without the other.
Can I say the quiet part out loud here for a second?
Well, here comes two crazy guys talking. You ready for this, T-Mose?
Man, T-Mose is my guy.
I feel like I need to remove myself from this question.
We need to go back out to our favorite steak joint and get another drink sometime.
I'm in.
So like, I'm in, bud. Let's go. Let's get after it.
Westside plays prep. Somebody ought to come see us.
We can get an early drink. It's fine.
Wow. You two out on DB. That's cool.
Never too early to stop. Cool. Never too early to have a little afternoon drink,
Wow.
No, so we got a comment on YouTube that says kid transfers out of high school. Kid transfers during high school years. Kid has to sit out of sports activity for 2 years. After all, it's about the education. Can we say the quiet part out loud? Because two things here. Number one,
Christmas.
Number one, I already addressed this with Nate, is the mechanics that allow you to transfer for better opportunities outside of sports are the same mechanics that allow you to transfer for sports.
Why would you do would you do that to the kid?
No, but here's the thing, right? So this is the quiet part that we're not saying out loud. Is we're like, oh, people are up in arms about Millard South or West Side or whoever recruiting kids or whatever because they just want to be better at football. So we're going to penalize kids because you want to be better at football and you're the one getting your head kicked in right now. It's for the same motivation. The people that are mad about transfers are mad for the same motivation for the people that like transfers. They want to be better at sports. That's the whole thing. Because if we didn't care about being better at sports, we wouldn't care that there were people getting their head kicked in by Millard South or West Side or Millard North or whoever, right? Like, that's the quiet part we're not saying out loud, is the people that want to enact all these stringent policies to hammer this down. It's also just for the purpose of being better at sports.
No, you're right. They 100% do not enjoy being on the short end of those sticks.
That's it, right?
You're right. It's, but here's the other thing, and this is the one where people do talk about it. I don't think it's and back to the schools and the educational piece, like the schools that are getting a lot of the transfers, are they not really good academically too?
You're right. You're right.
And so if Mr. Benning's son wants to go to West Side, is that not a great school? Like, academically, test scores, all of that.
Is that not also
building, great, well behaved?
Is that also not better for him outside of football then, right? Right?
Exactly. That's the part where, like it's, people want to point at sports, but, and, I'm not going to specifically call out any schools, but a lot of the schools that aren't doing great at sports also are struggling a little bit academically.
T-Mose dropping truth bombs.
Nobody wants to talk about that.
Dropping truth bombs on us on his way out. Hey, text me, T-Mose. Let's go get a drink.
Hey, how are you? Wait. Before you get out, because we're going to transition to college football. How are you feeling about your Sooners?
Oh, well, I didn't have a Twitter rant this week, so that was good.
You realize you had one of the most epic meltdowns I have ever seen. Do you remember the game about? No. The beers until they score again.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we had a nice dinner at 801 that night, but I don't really recall a lot of it. But it sounded like we had a good time.
What are you thinking for the remainder of the season?
Oh, well, I will say Saturday's kind of big because I'm, outside of that and then the main game. I mean, those are other than that, they're going to need an upset to be bowl eligible. So I thought 8-4 was pretty reasonable going in. I don't see any way with the offense that they're going to find 8 wins. So we've moved to the goalpost to 6-6.
All right, my man.
All right,
I'll catch you later on.
We appreciate it. That's a good call there.
He's funny.
He is funny. I like T-Mose.
Yeah.
Spent a lot of time with him hanging out on sidelines.
You talk about a guy that knows where the bodies are buried. Leave that guy alone.
Yeah, I wouldn't come for T-Mose.
I'm jealous.
That's why nobody really said. I mean, it's gotten ridiculous.
I'm jealous because when he called in, I asked him if we could just have our own segment.
He's
about you guys.
He's hilarious.
You can always call him back, Shane. You can just have a little conversation.
Remember that dude used to be my co-host, and we're like, we have no idea where. I mean, he lit the whole show on fire. I remember we were talking to somebody from Soonerscoop.com, and he was getting into golf.
Oklahoma golf.
Oh yeah. Then he somehow morphed it into minimum wage and what should be going on during COVID. Oh, it was incredible. I was like, this dude.
Did anybody call him a liberal hack too, or?
So it's hard to see. You wouldn't know what because
I have a pretty good idea because I've talked to him a lot, but like off the rip, no, I'd have no idea.
He's pull some wild cards on you.
No, we love T-Mose. Coming up here in a little bit, we're going to talk to Brian Edwards about some college football, NFL, see what he's feeling. But we'll kind of put a bow on this conversation as we transition into college football and NFL for the last hour or so. But
do appreciate Neuhaus, though. That takes some stones.
I appreciate Neuhaus coming on, and I mean, he had no idea what we were going to ask him. He had no idea where that conversation was going to go, so I appreciate that. And I do appreciate all the interaction we've had on social media as well. I know this is a thing that people care about a lot, but I think we just need to acknowledge that most of us care about it for selfish reasons.
Yeah. You got a great question we'll have to come back with. We're trying to figure out why people keep using the word recruiting when it's not the schools it's the parents and the kids.
For the most part, yes.
I mean, are we not going to talk about that?
For the most part, it's
unbelievable.
Most player movement is player and parent led.
Yeah.
Whether it's for football, whether it's for IB, whether it's for debate, whether it's for band, whether it's for newspaper, most of it is player and parent led. We got Brian Edwards coming up next.
We will be back. will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio. Now, Vegas insider, senior handicapper, and fan of the cold Budweiser bottles, Brian Edwards.
It's got to be touchdown, touchdown, touchdown.
Brian Edwards.
I don't really love it.
Brian Edwards.
Were they using the cream cheese to butter the bagel?
Brian Edwards.
I'm going with the cowgirl.
Here is Brian Edwards.
Joining us now is Brian Edwards, our Vegas insider from Major Wager. B, what's going on, man?
Good morning, fellas. What's happening?
B, how we doing? What are you doing getting it right on the first
right
shot?
off the rip? Look at you go.
Right. And the thing is I'm far from ready to go. I've only been awake like 15 minutes. I've been up like before sunrise like 10 days in a row, but I don't know what got into me today. I slept in.
Hey,
wow.
We like it. You got to get rested up. You got a big weekend coming up.
I know. I feel great now. I feel like I got a good night's rest.
At what point can we talk you into Napier staying? Still none?
Stop it. What?
Listen, Brian,
instead it was such disgust.
Listen, man, I was
Ravi walked through these losses, and I think he could make a case to you.
I was real close.
Look at him. He's
blown out at home to A&M in Miami. Blown out at home, and the season over like that. Blowouts.
No,
we were down 33 to.
Listen, B, I almost sent you a tweet this weekend. I was so close when I thought they were going to beat Tennessee. I was going to be like, listen, we got to change the tide on Billy. They're better than they were, B. They're better.
he was painting his Mona Lisa, his masterpiece in incompetence in the first half when we had 4 red. And you're talking about keeping him. I mean, I've never seen such just unbelievable in the first 4 red zone trips, 3 points.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry, B. No. Oh man! All right, let's start with a biggie because gosh, this is a great one to start with because I don't know anything about either one of these teams in terms of consistency. Bama and Tennessee, it's a big one.
Yeah, so look, Bama's defense is struggling, but I think Tennessee's offense might be exactly what they need to get right. I mean, Tennessee gets bageled in the first half at Arkansas and at home to Florida, and Florida's defense has been awful going on 5 years now. Arkansas doesn't have a good defense. Nico's struggling. And Alabama's offense is fine. I know they weren't as good last week, 27 against South Carolina, but I mean, count me in for thinking South Carolina's front 7 is top 2 or 3 in America. Maybe not the whole defense. I think the whole defense, I mean, I haven't looked at their stats this week. The whole defense to me is top 15 in America. Talking about South Carolina. So anyway, I just I think Tennessee's struggling, man. If Graham Mertz doesn't get hurt, they don't win that game. If Florida gets like 6 to 9 points on 4 red zone trips in the first half instead of 3 they win last week. I like Bama -3. I just trust Milroe more than I do Nico. And yeah, I like Bama.
B, let's go to this very classic Big 12 matchup that we've got, Cincinnati versus ASU. That's a game I know you got on a little early, but that line has slowly climbed up. I know it was 4.5 some places. I've got it at -5 this morning. How you feel about the Bearcats and Sun Devils?
Okay, so Sunday morning, I've noticed a few weeks back, FanDuel has got their lines up for the next week at like 8 a.m. Sunday morning, or maybe even before that. Whenever I wake up Sunday morning, I look at them. And the one that really stood out to me this past Sunday was Cincinnati -2.5. I tweeted it out. I believe it was 11:09 a.m. Sunday morning. And I was able to get it Sunday night at 2.5 on 2 of my accounts. A third, I got -3. I wrote an article about it Monday morning. It's my favorite pick of the week. And then yesterday, or actually, no, it was late Tuesday night, I noticed some books moved to 3.5. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I'm glad I'm in, at 2.5. And then yesterday morning at like 10-ish, it moved to 5.5. And I go to Twitter. I'm going Arizona State. I was looking for an ASU beat writer and I couldn't find it on my Twitter. And anyway, I couldn't find out what was going on. Next thing you know, it's 6.5, and then I think it was Pete Thamel of ESPN tweeted that Levitt, the QB for ASU's out, and Jeff Sims is starting
our guy Jeff
for ASU. Your guy, especially from the game at Colorado last year. But anywho, he's starting. So I think I'm in at 2.5, but I think I'm okay with telling listeners to bet it at 4.5 or 5 because I did see a 4.5 a minute ago. But whatever the case, Brendan Storsby's playing great. He's got a 13-3 TDI-INT ratio and 4 rushing touchdowns. And since he could easily be 6-0, but they're 4-2 and they've covered for me in 3 straight games. So again, I'm in at 2.5 and 3. It's 4.5 or 5 now. I think I still like it, but I think listeners get what I'm saying. I mean, I got a better number.
Hey, all right, B. This will make you a huge fan here because you're going to cap this game for us. Indiana, big noon kickoff at home. Land a 6.5 against dear old Nebraska U.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't like Indiana as much as I have been every week, but I feel like a sellout if I don't keep backing them. So I'm just going to keep rolling with them. I mean, they've covered every game. They have not trailed yet all year, and they're at home 2 weeks to prepare as well, right? Yeah. So I'm going with Indiana. It's not a big opinion. I mean, I have been big on them like every week. I just feel like a sellout if I don't stick with them the way they've been hooking me up. So I'm sticking with them -6.5. I would really like a more so like, in a money line, or I tweeted you on money line parlay, so we can get into that here in a minute.
I would say that's what I want to get to. I love a parlay, be like that. Play big, win big. That's my sweet spot right there. What are you liking for the parlay this week?
Yeah, so forgive me, I have not put it in the parlay calculator, so I'm not even sure what it pays, but I sure think it's going to win, and I'll put it in the parlay calculator and DM you guys after the segment, and y'all can tell the audience. But so I like Cal. So my bad, guys. Not very well prepared today. So let's go Indiana, Cincinnati, Texas, and Cal, because the Texas line went up. I bought it from 3.5 to 3 early in the week for a little bit, but now that it's up to like 4.5, was it even 5 when I peeked at it earlier? But I'm not sure the payout, but I like those 4 teams to win outright. Bearcats, Hoosiers, Texas, and Cal Bears.
That is that's quite the parlay you got there, B. What do you have for us? I know you've got a little NFL. Oh, wait, I forgot about my fave, Georgia Tech. What do you got on Georgia Tech?
Yeah, so well, I mean, have y'all heard any Haynes King news today? I mean, I'm not betting it unless Haynes King is upgraded. Brent Key said he was day-to-day Monday. He left the UNC game. I think it was pretty late when he left last week. But look, Brent Key 7-3 against the spread with 5 outright wins as a double-digit underdog, and the stats are even better just overall as a dog. But if Haynes King can't play, I'm not betting it. But if Haynes King's in the lineup and I can still get double digits, then I'll take Georgia Tech. That game's in Atlanta, but not at Bobby Dodd. It's at Mercedes-Benz, where the Falcons play. So I'm sure Notre Dame might have as many fans as Georgia Tech. Heck, maybe even more.
You don't think Georgia Tech's making the short trip to the dome there?
5 extra minute drive.
Listen, that might be too much. Those engineers are saying it's not worth it. I know you've got a couple NFL plays this week as well. Let's start with Panthers Commanders, and then we'll wrap up with one of the marquee matches of the weekend. I've got Washington currently at -8.5.
Okay. Well, I'm seeing a 7.5 at South Point and a few 8s. I do see a couple of 8.5s as well. I got it at 7, but look, I think we're okay. At 8, I made Washington 11.5, and I also like Washington's team total over 30.5. So Carolina 1-5, both straight up and against the spread, and their losses have been by margins of 18, 26, 10, 23, and 37. I know these big favorites have not been covering in the NFL, but I think we've got an exception here. I've gone 4-0-1 against the spread, backing Washington their last 5 games in a row, the push last week. But I definitely don't think any less of them. Losing by 7 at Baltimore on a day I thought Baltimore played pretty well. So, bounce back mode. I think Commanders put it on Carolina. I'm okay with -8 or even 8.5.
B, can I go back to college real quick with Texas being the new number 1, and a lot of people think they're the most complete team. What did you make that number this week?
So I made it 4.5, and I thought I was on the high side, and it came out at 3.5, and I was thinking maybe it'll go. Maybe we'll get some money on Georgia as an underdog, and it'll go and get a clean 3. I bought it to 3, but just only for a little bit. I'm wishing I put more on it, but if I've got it in that money line parlay and I bought a little bit to 3, I feel decent about where I'm at. But I would never lay 4.5 or 5 against Kirby. But Georgia just hasn't looked that impressive. Go ahead.
How much better would we feel about Georgia if Bama would look better since over the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, I think we would feel better, but and I know it was a look ahead spot, but they just, you can't put Mississippi State away at home. And if we just look at the whole resume, really since the second half of the Clemson game, what has Georgia done impressive? I mean, the offense was impressive in the second half at Bama, but I mean, you were lucky to win at Kentucky. You beat an FCS team in Tennessee Tech. You fell down big to Alabama. I mean, you ho-hum lackluster non-covering win over Auburn and another lackluster non-covering home win over Mississippi State. Now, flip side, you could make the argument Texas hasn't really played anybody because Oklahoma is missing its 5 best wide receivers, and Michigan's not what it was last year. So, I mean, you could make an argument for either side, but I think Texas.
B, real quick, Lions 1.5-point dogs on the road against the Vikings. Who you got?
Yeah, I would take the Lions as a dog anywhere except for at Kansas City and at Baltimore, I think, this weekend. So I know it's a back-to-back road situation, but they know if they lose, they fall behind 2 games in the division in Minnesota, and really like 2.5 games because Minnesota would briefly have the head-to-head tiebreaker. So I don't think there's going to be a letdown by Detroit. I like the Lions.
That's Brian Edwards, Vegas Insider Major Wager. We appreciate it, B.
Thanks, fellas. Y'all have a great weekend.
Michael Bruntz coming up next.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
I think the new era of college football, super conferences, the portal, roster parity. I think the game is in a different place, and so when you turn the game on, you don't know what's going to happen. Teams that you kind of say to yourself, well, that shouldn't be a powerhouse, or they're not a blue blood, but they might be a heck of a team now. And teams that were a really good team last year, their roster can change quickly, and so every Saturday makes for some interesting things to happen. There's only 3 undefeated teams in an 18-team Big Ten. And so, I think it's all very interesting.
Kicking off hour number 3 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, KFOR, and Lincoln. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla. We're joined now by Michael Bruntz from Husker 24/7. Bruntsy, what's going on?
Not much. How you guys doing?
Bruntz, you on the move?
No, just trying to get back home. But they got South Street closed down in Lincoln, and we're just all over the place right now. So just trying to get home.
What time are you leaving for Bloomington?
Well, we're staying in Paradise, so leave about 9. Not in a real hurry to get there.
Yeah.
So much time in the Haute.
Yeah.
Terre Haute.
What are you gonna go stop and anything on the list to stop and see?
I need to get John Niatawa on the phone and see where to go in Terre Haute. He's I believe he's a native there, so see what's going on. But no, I'm sure there's probably some Larry Bird memorabilia somewhere in that town, right?
I would imagine. Brunt, so you're a little bit like Kurt Signetti. You're not trying to spend too much time in a hotel?
Yes, that's correct.
Brunt,
among the many things that Kurt Signetti and I have in common.
Yeah, I think it's a laundry list.
We're both very brash. Yes, we're brash.
Do you tell people to Google you often?
On the daily.
Wow. Brunsey, is it us because we could be victims of Indiana? It seems like, and maybe it's just because it is here locally, that the charm is kind of swung on Coach Signetti.
Yeah. I mean, has it moved? I feel like it's kind of already been there for some people. It's funny, like, you kind of get he was at the halftime of the Indiana basketball game, and you're like, who's this guy? Like, it felt a little, I don't know. I'm trying to think if there's a coach in the past that has, like, chirped a lot like that and just not backed it up. But I do think that, he can coach. I mean, and guys, there's certain guys in college football that have won at a lot of places and, have maybe not gotten the opportunities as earlier in their career as maybe they should have. I'm thinking of a guy like Willie Fritz, not like, not a guy that, like, I don't think their personality-wise very similar, but just a guy that's won at a lot of places, a guy that, knows how to build a program. And, we'll see, how much of the early success in Indiana's schedule and who they've played so far and haven't played. But, to be where they're at a place like Indiana in the first year, I mean, that's not easy to do, I don't think.
Bruntz, I'm glad you brought that up with the schedule with Indiana, because it seems like over the course of the last week or so, or 2 weeks with the bye, that a lot of people around the state of Nebraska tend to believe the stats we see about Indiana's team, whether it's top 10 offense, top 10 defense, whether it's the scores that they put up, whatever the case is, but have a harder time believing the stats that Nebraska, specifically on defense, has put up, despite the fact that Nebraska has played a more difficult schedule. Do you have any theories about why that might be the case?
Do I have any theories about why people don't believe Nebraska's defense is potentially good?
Why they believe the Indiana stats are indicative of who they are as a team, but maybe not Nebraska specifically on defense are indicative of who they are?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I think that I don't know. It's hard. I mean, like I think sometimes whenever you're presented with a list of statistics, and when you go down the list on Indiana, I mean, there's not a lot there that you point to and say, like, aha, this is what they don't do well. Like, this is what Nebraska has to exploit. And I don't know. I mean, I guess maybe, there's a tendency to say, okay, a team scores, 40 a game and, top 10 defense, top 10 offense. I mean, I don't know. I don't know why people buy into that more than, what Nebraska's defense is doing. maybe you would need to talk to the people that are saying that. I mean, I can't speculate on that, but I don't know. It's you know, I think they're a good team. I think they're a potentially explosive team. You know, I don't know that, especially looking at who they've played in conference play, that there's any teams in there that you would say are overly physical in the way that Nebraska is. I mean, you know, I don't think that Northwestern is necessarily playing to what their reputation in the past has been. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know why that is. But, you know, I think the thing that you have to at least appreciate is for a team like Indiana and a team that's kind of like growing up, so to speak, in a new culture and a new coaching staff, there's landmines there, right? Like you go across the country and no matter how bad UCLA is, and I think they're certainly a struggling team and program, it's still, you know, 3 time zones away and you're on the road, and, you know, they went out there and took care of business. And I think you have to give them credit for that and not kind of step on their toe. But, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's going to be this game feels like much more of a measuring stick for Indiana than it does for Nebraska. I think that's my feeling going into it.
Oh, Bruntz, that's interesting. Why do you think that? Because I mean, it's the best team Nebraska's faced so far. Why do you feel it's more of a measuring stick for Indiana?
Well, you've got big noon kickoff in Bloomington. You have a lot of people talking about Indiana. You're undefeated. You're starting to get that conversation of, you know, you start looking ahead on Indiana's schedule, and you start looking into November and you know what they could be at the end of the season. And you know, I think there's a little bit of pressure that comes with that for a program, no matter how outwardly confident that program is. So I just think there's more pressure there for Indiana, because as you know, you asked, you know, why people are willing to believe what Indiana is. I mean, I think there's a lot of people also that are looking at Indiana and say, like, okay, they kind of need to prove it a little bit against somebody. Like, I'm hearing more of that than I am the other thing. So, you know, I that's why I think there's a little bit more pressure there, because they're in a situation that, I mean, they're not in very often there. So, you know, you got to keep that rolling, and you know, I think there's a little bit more that comes with that, and kind of blocking out the noise than you know. I would feel differently if this game were in Lincoln. I think in some ways the game being in Indiana favors Nebraska somewhat, that you can kind of get in that bubble, you can go there, you can play. You know, certainly the crowd's going to be raucous and whatever, but it just feels like the fact that it's a home game and everything else that comes with it adds more pressure to Indiana's side than does Nebraska.
Bruntz, if you could rank impact of outcome, special teams, offense, defense for Nebraska playing well, how would you rank them?
I would say, well, I think the offense is going to have to play well in this one. I mean, I think the defense is going to show up. I mean, I think they've been, for the last couple of weeks, trending in a positive direction, and kind of getting to what you thought they would be this year with the personnel that they have. So I think if Nebraska is going to win on Saturday, I think you need the defense to be its normal kind of wrecking shop self and tough against the run, and I think they will be. I think I'm changing the question a little bit and saying to expectation. So I think the offense needs to play better than it has. I think you're going to need 4 quarters of good offense against Indiana. I mean, I don't think this is a 14-7 type game. So I would say offense, and then I would say defense, and then I think you need special teams to just be. We're seeking neutral. That's what you're looking for from Nebraska's special teams. Is you want no catastrophic mistakes.
Just break even.
Yes. And I think if Nebraska does that recipe, I think they'll have a pretty good shot at winning that game.
Bruntz, I think most people would agree that Colorado is the best offense Nebraska's faced until this point. Indiana certainly joins that list on Saturday. In your mind, how much better or how much difference is there if we're looking for a frame of reference for Indiana's offense between them and Colorado, just in terms of quality? I know they do different things.
I guess it depends on how good do you feel about balance, I guess, is the thing.
Yeah, no, I mean, the balance is that's the difference. I mean, with Colorado, you knew what you were getting. You knew you were going to probably not see much run game. You were just going to have to get after Sanders and cover on the back half, and that was the blueprint. I think with Indiana, it's a little bit tougher because they've got some explosive guys on the outside that can hurt you, and they spread the ball around a ton, and they're efficient. They run the ball well, and so I don't know that Nebraska's defense is going to just be able to completely choke them out and bottle up that offense. I mean, there's just too much that they're able to do, and the thing that kind of makes all that go is you're facing a sixth-year quarterback that's played a lot of football, that makes good decisions. And so I think for Nebraska, it's going to come down to tackling, avoiding the big plays, and you're going to have to play to your strengths a little bit, where your guys up front that are the strength of that defense are going to need to have a good day. I mean, you're going to need Nash Hutmaker to have a really kind of nashy game where he's collapsed in the middle of the offensive line, giving space for Bullock and those linebackers to get sideline to sideline and make tackles. And I wouldn't be surprised if Nebraska has a few defensive wrinkles in this one. I mean, It feels like a Javen Wright type game, where you're going to need somebody that can be pretty versatile, in coverage and able to play the run. I think that's the strength of John Bullock. He's really good in coverage, former defensive back, and he can also run sideline to sideline. So, I do think for Nebraska's defense, as long as they can win up front, and especially in this game, I think they'll have a shot to kind of make the day more difficult for Indiana than what they've faced so far this season.
I thought it was interesting to hear the defensive players talk about disguising and kind of what they do pre-snap. Just hearing it made me think that this Indiana kind of does what they do, right? Which may be why they're so efficient. I'll be curious to see those, you called it, like those wrinkles that you're talking about, and how much of that will have to do with recognition.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's, and maybe that's the benefit of, I know Indiana's coming off a bye and they're going to have their stuff too, but I mean, maybe that's the benefit of kind of being able to push the pause button a little bit and say, what can we do that they haven't seen yet? And what do we have the ability to do that they haven't seen yet? So, the other piece of it too, I mean, just hypothetically speaking, let's say Nebraska is able to make life difficult for Indiana. I mean, how do they deal with that? Because that's not something that they've really they've been faced with this year, are defenses that are able to do that. So, I mean, there's a lot of what ifs in this game. It feels like more so than maybe what we've had so far this season for Nebraska. And I think that's kind of why it's a little bit more of an intriguing game to me.
We're talking with Michael Bruntz from Husker 24/7. Bruntz, which do you think is more likely, that Nebraska's defense, which we think more highly of than their offense, I think in general, slows down an Indiana offense that we think is pretty good, or Nebraska's offense is able to take advantage of an Indiana defense that statistically very good, but I think we think less of than their offense?
I would say it's probably more likely that the defense is able to do what it's going to do. I think when you look at what Nebraska's defense has done to this point, and they're not giving up a ton of big plays, being very stout against the run, I think to me that speaks to a group that's pretty disciplined for the most part. And I think just kind of looking at the way Indiana does things, I mean, that to me is going to be a big key, is if Nebraska is able to do what they do defensively, I think they'll be okay. and I think that's a little bit more likely in this game. For Nebraska's offense, it's been kind of fits and starts. It's like when you get down to the last few drips of gas in your lawnmower, and it kind of fires up and then it doesn't. And I think they need to be a little bit more consistent there. And I still have questions about how much this offense is going to be able to run the ball. And I think you're going to have to be able to do that on Saturday.
Bruntz, if you take Coach Rule, he talked about kind of what they want to accomplish and what you do during the bye week. And he kind of broke it down into 3 phases. And he said, part of the self-scouting is, what do we do well? What are we not doing well? What are we spending too much time doing that we don't do well? Things like that. If you could be Coach Rule for a second and you wanted to spend less time doing what you don't do well, where would you start? Would you go to the run game?
I don't know. I mean, it's a hard question because
is.
I get what you're saying. Like, but yeah, that's one thing that you have to be able to do.
Yeah.
Like in some form or fashion, right? Like,
yeah.
I don't think this offense is going to come out and run for 220 out of nowhere. I mean, maybe they do, but I don't think it's likely. So I don't know. I mean, I think that's one phase that you just have to continue to hit on. And I do wonder, though, if, we talk about bye week wrinkles and things like that. I mean, do we see Nebraska more out of the eye? Do we see more of that look with Mazuka as an extra tight end? Is there more of a place for Barrett Liebentritt out there? I don't know if you can do things differently and have success there than what they've done so far.
That's interesting you say that, because that was on the heels of him saying this week in his presser, he's like, we run duo, we run power, we run some ice. Like he said, we're kind of going to do what we do. I wonder if, seriously out loud, if you may be onto something there. Like maybe that's it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you go to that look 5 more times in a game. I mean, I don't know. Or you find some complementary plays to run out of those sets that Indiana hasn't seen yet. I mean, that to me feels a little bit more likely than, all of a sudden unlocking some kind of secret sauce on what you've been doing to this point. Because, I mean, as much as he was talking this week, I think about, how do you make a 40-yard run into a 70-yard run, or, the big kind of splash plays. I think for Nebraska, when the offense has looked best, it's how do you take a 2-yard run and make it a 6 or a 7-yard run? I mean, like when they've been really moving the ball on the ground, Colorado was this way. They did it a little bit against Illinois too, kind of comes to mind. But, when you get Dowdell going for 6 or 7 a carry versus 2, that makes things so much easier, for what they want to do. So I think that's more of a key, I think, than, how do you get Emmett Johnson shaken loose for a long run? You'll take that. But, I think just kind of getting some of the body blows to be a little bit harder, I think would be a good investment of time.
Bruntz, we hear Coach Rule kind of talk about that same thing that you were talking about, turning those 2-yard runs and the 4-yard runs, the 4-yard runs, the 6-yard runs, and whatnot. I guess my question has been, and how much of that do you think is things that can be worked on in season, and how much of it is sort of just a natural running back feel? Because I'm having a hard time sort of figuring out, okay, if a guy is just not seeing it, how do we expect that to turn into more? But maybe there's something else there that I'm missing.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe you coach it differently than the way you are. This is around the time last year where they pivoted pretty hard and were really kind of hammering on the fumbles and had some success cutting those down, at least with the running backs. I mean, a lot of quarterbacks, whatever. But, I don't know if you coach it differently, you point things out differently. I agree with you. I mean, I don't think it's just one thing there. Like, it feels like some holes have been missed. It feels like reads have been missed at times. Sometimes it feels like the offensive line's just not able to climb and get to the second level sometimes. So I don't know. I mean, is it running certain things with certain personnel at certain times differently? There's got to be something you can do there, because, at least the staff, in their history and their DNA, I mean, they're a power run team and they've had success doing it. That maybe there's some kind of way to coach it differently that they haven't, hit on yet, or something like that. But yeah, I mean, feels a tough thing to coach in the middle of the season. I don't know if, you just have a clip, a video of guys just missing holes and just force their eyelids open and make them watch it. I don't know. I don't know what the approach is there, but maybe you try different stimulus and maybe you get a different result.
Hey, so Bruntz, would you rather be, because it feels like Indiana's more than a plucky little story, right? I mean, I think most people think this is a good football team. And Coach Cignetti had this kind of a similar deal at James Madison when App State came in last year, and game day was there, and I think App State got him in overtime. Would you rather be Indiana Part 2 or Indiana Part 1 with some of that James Madison feel, or Nebraska, kind of the other little story that's a little more cutesy right now than Indiana? Because I think the perception is Indiana's better, at least nationally, but you haven't gotten over the hump in these games. Psychologically, who would you choose to be?
Well, which team do you think is going to react more, like how they're going to react more to that? Which one? That was a question. Like, do you guys think, do you feel like at this point more of what you're going to get from Nebraska or more of what you're going to get from Indiana? Because that's the thing. Like, they brought a bunch of guys from James Madison, and I think that's
Indiana has played the same all year more than Nebraska has. Does that matter?
Yes, I think it does. I don't know though. I mean, I think there's maybe something to the lights and everything else of this game. I don't know. I mean, I think the thing for Nebraska is there's been the inconsistency more so than Indiana. Nebraska also has not broken through in a situation like, I mean, everybody knows the winless streak against ranked teams thing. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's kind of a push in my mind. Like, I still think there's probably a little bit of question about how Indiana responds to a situation like this, even though they have been consistent. They have relatively flown under the radar for the most part. I mean, playing Maryland on BTN and Northwestern, and the game against UCLA was a pretty quiet, snoozy game. Like, I think you kind of have to deal with that as a program. And for Nebraska, it feels like it's just like a mental thing of like, how do you make those couple plays late when you need to win a game like this? So I don't know. I don't know that there's necessarily one that I would choose to be over the other, because I feel like both, I can make a pretty compelling case that I would not want to be that team in a situation like this. Because I think as much as I said earlier, Indiana needs to, it's a measuring stick game nationally for them. I think Nebraska kind of for itself needs a game like this to kind of say like, okay, we can play these types of games and have success. I mean, I think nationally there's more pressure on Indiana. I think Nebraska's is more internally for just kind of how do you make that next step as a program.
That's Michael Bruntz, Husker 24/7. Bruntz, we appreciate it. As always, have a safe trip to Bloomington.
Thanks, Bruntz.
Thanks, guys.
More Hurrdat Sports Radio coming up next.
We will be back. will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Welcome back to Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, KFOR in Lincoln. That's DBM Ravi Lulla here at Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill. It's time for Bet On It, brought to you by Warhorse Sportsbook. Make sure you get out to the casino in Omaha every Saturday this month for your chance to win $10,000 at 10:30 p.m. or from 6 to 10, you can win $500 of free slot play every half hour. Go check out warhorse.com for more information. All the house rules. You know, there's a bunch of details and stuff you got to get. Details are important. Nuance is important. Context is important.
For some.
Not being a dumbass on the internet's important, but we just ignore that all the time, too. It's fine. It's all good.
You got a segment.
We like to talk about, you know, sports on here sometimes, and I like to talk about the NFL. Can we talk about the NFL?
Sure, of this game. Woo.
I don't love I don't know what to do with this Broncos-Saints game, if I'm being honest with you.
Who's playing for the Saints?
That's part of the reason I don't know what to do with it.
No Shaheed, no Olave, no Carr.
And Broncos are still just -3.
Yeah, I know.
That's a stinky, stinky line.
Okay, so was that you that gave me the 566 in 564 where something had been done 566 times? Was that DeMarinis?
I think it was DeMarinis. I don't think it was me. That sounds like a DeMarinis stat.
No, so I need to go back and find it. But Bo Nix.
Mm-hmm. Oh, he mentioned both of us, I think. There had been 566 people who have attempted at least 100 passes since 2007.
Yeah.
And Bo Nix is like 564th in whatever metric this was. I think QBR, measuring their quality. Deshaun Watson was dead last.
566.
Yeah, he was dead last. 566 out of 566. Bo Nix just 2 spots ahead of him.
And I think the thing about that stat was those guys are pretty recent for the amount of time that this stat had been being tracked.
That's a pretty large sample size at this point, right?
Yeah, that's crazy.
Everybody was it doesn't. I mean, 100 passes is what, 3 games tops for most people, about 3 games.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty good sample size for all these different quarterbacks, and yet we're sitting here and we still don't. I don't know what to do with the Broncos at all.
TK said bet the under.
It's 37.5. It's getting pretty low
That's
there.
low.
But I if I'm betting anything here, it probably is the under.
What kind of number is this going to draw?
In terms of viewers?
Yeah. Because, I mean, what are you up against? You're up against Georgia State and Marshall?
Yeah, Georgia State, Marshall.
And BC and Vatech?
BC Vatech is probably the one that interests me the most out of those 3 games. But I'm not going to pretend like any of them are real barn burners.
Yeah, maybe we're just resigned. Unless you get like the random good conference game.
Mm-hmm. On Thursdays?
I just don't know if you're going to get super high quality.
It might be weirdly, the Friday college games have been way better.
Yeah, we get your boys tomorrow, right?
Yes.
And Oregon is tomorrow.
Oregon's tomorrow,
but they're at Purdue.
And then there's another good one.
So I wouldn't necessarily call that.
No, but you've got Oklahoma State, BYU tomorrow, which I'm interested in.
Yeah, because I
don't know what to do with Oklahoma State yet.
Well, you could figure out a ton about BYU.
And I like BYU. Big Kalani Sitake guy here.
That's laying the 9?
I don't know if I'm laying the 9. I'm interested in watching because I do think, despite the record, I think this is one of the better opportunities for BYU to kind of show who they are so far on the season.
National television.
I don't know that a lot of people that aren't paying real close attention
know that they're undefeated.
Know that they're 13th in the country. I mean, this is a team that is in the Big 12 and on the doorstep of a college football playoff opportunity halfway through the season. I thought that Kansas State game was really impressive. I thought the at SMU was maybe their best win of the season. That's a good SMU team.
You think SMU settled in on
Jenkins?
Obviously the quarterback spot, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
He's been just way better. I don't think there's a lot of going back and forth on that anymore. But I think this is a good opportunity I think that Kansas State was a night game, so maybe I think people saw that a little bit. This is a good opportunity for BYU at a point where they're high enough in the rankings, people should be paying attention, because I think they were unranked in that Kansas State game. So I don't know how much people were paying attention to it.
That or low mid-20s.
Yeah, they weren't. It wasn't I don't think it was a marquee matchup at the time for most people. This Oklahoma State BYU game is probably my favorite pre-Saturday game of the weekend, but I do have a weird BYU affinity too. So
yeah, which started early.
It's been years. Legitimately, it's been years. I've liked Kalani Sitake for a long time.
Well, what is he only going into? What is this, year 4? Were you a Bronco Mendenhall guy?
I think he's been there longer than 4 years now.
It seems like only 4.
He's been there.
Was it COVID? Was it pre-COVID?
I think so. He's been there.
So Bronco's been at UVA for how?
Bronco's gone now.
No, I
right,
know.
But he'd been gone from UVA, I think, for 3 years now.
So that probably makes Sitake maybe 6 years.
He's been there since 16.
8.
He's been there since 2016.
Doesn't seem that long.
And he's been. I was a Mendenhall guy though. I thought he was a really good coach. But
yeah, I remember his name coming up in 16.
Yeah. I thought that would have been a really nice choice for Nebraska.
What was the knock? He was too old. I can't remember.
I don't remember what the knock was on him, because he wasn't that old at the time.
No, I know.
In 16, he wouldn't have been. But I think the really good Sitake year was 2020. They went 11-1.
Yeah,
because that's the Zach Wilson year.
I knew there was something about
the COVID year. Yeah, that was his breakout year, because he had a couple 7-6s before that, and then he kind of took off the next 2 years.
What's been his worst year?
Second year he was 4-9 in 2017. We're second worst after that was last year when they were 5-7. But other than that, he's had a winning record every year, made a bowl game every year. We're a big Kalani Sitake guy. Yeah. I also like the way he kind of puts his program, like puts the team together. They're often really, really good on the lines. They play like a pretty physical style of football, despite the fact that they've had some, especially with Zach Wilson, they had some explosive offenses there. I just like they kind of remind me there's a little bit of Utah to them.
What did you say the Texas Georgia line crept to 5?
-5 for Texas.
Jeez.
Are too high on it? You think too high?
Oh, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Although my man Husker X's and O's says analytics hate
Georgia in this spot.
Hate Georgia.
I saw some analytics had them up like almost double digits. With what like the predictive scores were on this one. I saw close to 10.5 on some of these analytics, which I think is nuts. That's a high number.
Oh.
That's a big number. I understand how Vegas is putting it a little bit higher because of the perception of how Georgia's been playing. I don't really understand how the analytics come up with a double-digit game in this one.
In the chat, does anyone think 27.5? So the funny thing about this game for Oregon, 27.5 is too high. It seemed too low
for against Purdue.
Yeah.
So the only reason I wouldn't say it seems
let down.
Well, the only reason I wouldn't say it seems too low is we haven't really seen Oregon put it on bad teams this year. Right? Like they're not blowing teams out in the same way.
Especially since the offensive and QB change. OC.
Yes. Like we haven't seen them. There's a lot of, I don't remember the scores, but like 41-13s, like somewhere in that range when you're playing bad teams. Because I remember the narrative early in the season was, hey, is Oregon that good? They're having a hard time getting going. Yeah. And then obviously they got the good win against Ohio State that kind of alleviates some of that. But I don't think that we look at this team as hey, they're just going to blow the doors off people. They're going to win. They're going to win comfortably. But you get more than 3-4 touchdowns, I think it gets a little dicey about them covering.
20. I looked at it and I was like, well, what would I have made that? Probably like 34.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, maybe. I don't think
it is a quick emotional turnaround though for Purdue.
Yes.
And it was a physical game.
Yeah. That's a.
I mean, he might be. I don't want to assume he may be onto something. 27.5 for.
How do you think that number is being factored into Purdue dropping 46 in the second half? Like, do you think that's being considered at all?
Like maybe they
can score a little better. Like maybe they can keep up a little bit longer.
I'd have to see what their team total was, but yeah, that I could see that
because that's kind of where my head went. Besides the Oregon part, is maybe there's some recency bias there of, oh man, Purdue just put up a ton of second half points against a team that I think most people think is still pretty decent in Illinois.
Okay, so they're assuming Purdue's going to score because the total is 61.
Yeah, so they're thinking they're going to score.
Just 44-17.
Yes.
I'm just trying to get,
I think somewhere
42-14.
44-17 gets you 27 points and your total.
Huh.
So yeah, that makes sense.
They think Purdue's going to score.
And 44-17, like that's getting your butt kicked, but it's not going to cover 35, right?
And it include a couple of 2-point conversions.
Yeah. Or, maybe some missed kicks here or there. You never know.
Safety.
Oregon's missed some extra points this year, too. So you got to watch out. That's Bet On It, brought to you by Warhorse Sportsbook. Make sure you get to warhorsecasino.com for more info. We'll wrap up the show coming up next.
We will be back. We will be back. will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Wrapping up the show here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, KFOR in Lincoln. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla here at Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill, and it's time to hit the road with MH Hospitality. MH Hospitality, stay once and carry memories forever. Make sure you get to MH Hospitality. Forever? MHHospitality.net to check out all their properties. DB, we got some interesting teams on the road this week in football, and specifically, I think, in the NFL.
Yeah.
Chiefs on the road with the 49ers is the big one for me, obviously, for obvious reasons.
Seems like we all well, I don't want to speak for you, Shane, but it's a lot of nervous anxiety this week.
Oh, I don't feel
between the two of us.
I don't feel good.
I don't either.
I don't feel good at all. I don't know why San Francisco's favored in this game, if I'm being totally honest.
Well,
I don't. I mean, the Chiefs are better. The 49ers are missing a ton of people. Like, I don't feel.
How's your running back situation?
Lord knows somebody's got to be there. I mean, Kyle Juszczyk might be a starting running back.
Which isn't terrible.
No, it's not, but he's the fullback.
It takes away from what else.
It takes away from everything else he can do. But
I guess I didn't realize San Francisco was favored.
It was 1.5 last night when I looked it up.
Really?
I'll double check here. I still have it at 1.5 as of this morning.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's bonkers.
But it's at your place.
I don't care. Sometimes being on the road ain't so bad. I mean, if you're me, what confidence do you have that they're beating the Chiefs?
Maybe since Kansas City hasn't been as explosive on offense, you can keep them in front of you.
Right, but you're going to end up in the same situation the 49ers always end up with the Chiefs, where it's going to be close late, and they've got Patrick Mahomes, and we don't.
That's why it's only one.
That's what I don't like is, they can keep it close. The defense can keep it close. They're less explosive. They can keep it in front of you, but that's why the Chiefs are 5-0 is because at the end of the game, Mahomes is better than you.
My judgment is so clouded when it comes to Mahomes because I've seen like 91% of the time he's the difference.
100%.
And that's taking nothing away from Spags because defensively they play really, really good football.
Yes, this is a good football team in a lot of different places that allows them to be in this situation. But at the end of the day, when it comes down, whether it's a really good Bills team a couple years ago in the AFC Championship, whether it's a really good 49ers team last year in the Super Bowl, whether it's being 5-0 this year, at the end of the day,
I kind of like the Niners in this spot.
Do you?
Yeah.
I don't at all.
I like San Francisco better than I like Pittsburgh. And I think I saw a stat. Somebody sent it to me the other day. It's the one I was talking to Cynthia about Tomlin's record as a home dog.
Yeah.
I think he's 19-6-1.
Yeah.
As a home dog ATS. But why are the Jets favored?
Jets road favorites against the Steelers.
Man, they literally just lost to the Bills.
Is this really and this is the question for me. Is this the Devontae Adams bump or is it the Russell Wilson slander?
Well, apparently, since they're on national television again, the Steelers.
Yeah.
Which has been this way since the offseason.
It has. It's been every day.
And it's weird. They're talking about the quarterbacks again.
It's been almost every day. Is that the Devontae Adams bump or is it the Russell Wilson downgrade? Or a little combination of both?
Who did we just talk? Oh, it was Cynthia, right?
Yeah.
When she saw these are the kind of games that the Jets win. I was like, it kind of is, though.
Yeah. I wonder.
I know for sure, in spite of Tomlin's.
I don't feel good about the Jets being a favorite here.
Yeah, you think it's.
I think it's weird, just kind of public. I don't know. I don't feel good about it.
So you'd take the Steelers?
Yeah, at home, I think so.
Let's see, I'd take the Niners.
I would prefer if it was Justin Fields starting. Like, I'd prefer.
Well, they haven't really said
I'd prefer
yet.
if I knew it was Justin Fields starting, right? I would feel much better there because I think he's shown he can play at a competent level of football this year.
Who do you feel better? Let's. Okay, so we both have fan anxiety.
Yes, 100%. 100%. Yes.
How about the get fired game, the Sirianni Dable game?
We love a get fired game. That one is so Philadelphia, another road favorite, -3 against what I think is a bad Giants team. But I don't trust the Eagles as far as I can throw them.
Because you're fresh off of seeing what they did against the Browns, and that was coming off a bye.
That was fresh off the Browns, fresh off of Sirianni yelling at his own fans. Maybe the New York fans will be more hospitable to him than his home fans are. But I don't know what to do. I don't love – I don't know how you make the Eagles a favorite in that spot.
Did you – it's just – Daniel Jones throwing the ball over 20 yards is like –
you could have just stopped at Daniel Jones throwing the ball.
Well, sometimes he gets in these rhythms, and it's like,
where he looks okay.
I see what they see, and then it's like,
whoa. Isn't that a lot of guys though? Like a lot of the guys in the NFL, you can see stretches where you're like, oh, I get it, and then the rest of the time happens.
Like, yeah, there may be something to that.
A lot of most guys don't get to this point in the NFL or in their careers.
Well, I wouldn't say sometimes. I don't know. If the ball travels in the air more than 20 yards and it's from Justin Fields, I don't ever think it's going to be a completion.
Fair.
I don't.
Right. But there's something about you understand why Justin Fields has gotten the opportunities. He's an incredible athlete.
There's probably 12 quarterbacks when I watch him throw a ball and it's in the air and I can't see that. I'm like, it's either going to be PI or that it's a completion.
There's only a handful of guys, though, that I look at and say, I don't understand why they're getting this opportunity, where it just doesn't make any sense to me. That's kind of my point with Daniel Jones is, there's stretches where you see it, but then there's other stretches where you're like, what is happening here?
Yeah.
Right? One of the only guys right now that is in the I don't understand it at all is Deshaun Watson, right? I don't understand because it's been a long time since we've seen it with Deshaun Watson.
Can Stefanski just not have say-so in that?
I had a theory on the Browns.
Oh, this ought to be good.
And that's hitting the road with MH Hospitality, looking at our road teams here on Hurrdat Sports. But I do have a theory. It is kind of out there a little bit, but I'm trying to figure out because there's no logical reason, right, for the Browns to just keep riding with Deshaun Watson. Like you don't have dead cap money because you're not starting him. Like that's not part of the deal. It is what it is, whether he starts or sits, right? They do have their own first-round pick this year.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah.
It's the first time they've had their own first-round pick in a minute because of this Deshaun Watson trade. Is it just, hey, we can ride this thing out?
To go get who, though?
Anyone else? Do you like your chances better? Because after the year, the dead cap money goes down about $90 million.
It's a crazy number, but you're right.
It goes from 172 to 80. So you're saving about $90 million in dead cap money. Is it worth it just to say, hey, we'll give Shedeur or Carson Beck or Quinn Ewers or whoever you decide you like a chance at number one, because it can't be worse than what we're doing right now. But Deshaun Watson is going to make sure we get that number one pick because he's that bad. And then they trade Amari Cooper. Like, they're not trying to win.
Well, Cooper's, first of all, they gave him away for next to nothing.
Right.
But what was Cooper against the cap? Is it 20 mil?
I think so.
21.8 or something like that.
Yeah. Like, are they in tank mode? And they're like, the best way to lose is to keep playing Deshaun?
Cow, you're going to waste a pretty good defense on paper.
You are, but okay, you think of it this way, right?
So you're just looking at Myles Garrett and you'd be like, yeah, but no.
You know you're not going to win with Deshaun Watson. Maybe you look at the equation and you say, hey, we got deep enough on this thing that Jameis Winston can't pull us out of this hole. So what are my other options?
Well, there's still the responsibility to the other 51 guys that are going to dress.
But that's a football issue, not a front office issue, right? So you can see that.
Back to the original question. Does
Stefanski have any say here? It might be no.
Boy, that would be really tough to walk in that locker room.
I mean, we saw this with the Sixers, right?
Yeah.
During the process.
Way to trust the process.
Where you go and you say, hey, at least they said out loud so that the players knew what was happening. But you think it was good for...
How long did it take the NBA? Was it the next 2 years to put the kibosh on tanking with how they changed the...
I think the Sixers were doing that for at least 3
years
before they actually made changes to the lottery system. So they got pretty deep on it.
Which, by the way, did you see Paul George is hurt again?
I'm shocked. I'm stunned. But you think it was good for Michael Carter-Williams' development to be there while that was happening? No, right? You think it was good for Markelle Fultz's development to be there while that was happening? Now, he had other issues, right? But
apparently in Orlando, they say no.
But he seems okay now.
Yeah.
Maybe he's not number one pick good, but he seems okay. You can make the argument it wasn't even really good for Joel Embiid's development to be there during while all that was happening. But it's a front office decision versus a basketball decision.
And it is their own it is their own first round pick.
So it's going to be, it's going to be really high because they're terrible.
So
they're
172 million
versus 80
to be measurable for the number or for a first round pick. I still don't know who you go get though.
I don't either, because there's no clear cut this year, right? Unless they've fallen in love with someone
like Shiloh or
whether
Shedeur
or maybe you're in love with Carson Beck. I don't know. We see this all the time, right? They fall in love with a guy that nobody else necessarily.
No way.
I wouldn't think so. It's probably one of the other two. It's probably Shedeur or Carson. But like, front offices talk themselves into this stuff all the time. Doesn't mean it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Right? Front office, and we brought Markelle Fultz.
That's not. So I listen. I understand, but that's not even the most intriguing game in that window if you're talking about quarterbacks. Because I want to see the Stroud versus Love thing.
Oh, that's the best one, I think. The best matchup for that window.
Because at first blush, it doesn't seem like the Texans should be 5-1, but they are.
Although you do also get Lions Vikings in that window. That 12 o'clock window is low key pretty sweet. Yeah, I'm excited about it. I think it's a good NFL weekend. There's good games this weekend.
Clearly.
That's our guy, DB. I'm Ravi Lulla. We will be back tomorrow to wrap up the week here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
See you. Have a good day. Love you.